Welcome to Anubhava 2017. We'll begin the program momentarily. Please rise for an invocation prayer by priest Shiva Kumar.
Adipujyaya Devaya Dandamodhagadharine Vallabha Pranagrantaya Sri Ganeshaya Mangalam Vande Mahavallabha Ganapatim Madanarisonam Vamorasam Stavanita Bhujavettidangam Valle Sabhurvajamabhittadamasridana Vani Padi Pramuka Devaganarchidangrim Om Bhadrangarne Visrunayama Devaha Bhadram Vasse Makshavaryajatraha Thirairangaye Stuttabhagam Sastanovihi Veseva Devahitam Yatayuhu Swasti na Yendro Vriddasravaha Swasti na Pusha Visvavedaha Swasti na Staksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspatirdhadatu Om Shanti 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 Om
of North America, I'm excited to welcome you all to Anubhava 2017. This is the second year we are hosting a conference specifically for our Hindu young professionals, and today we will be reflecting on our own experiences as Hindus in America from a career perspective. Some of you moved here in the last few years for school or for work. Others, including myself, were either born here or raised here from a young age. At some point, all of us have had to find a way to fit in. Who are you when you go to work or school? How do you represent yourself? These are questions we don't really think about, but are subconsciously informed by our relationship with religion and culture. As we look towards launching or further establishing our careers, in whatever field this may be, it's interesting to consider how and why we do things the way we do, and specifically how Hinduism affects our daily lives. When our parents immigrated here, they did their best to teach us about Hinduism. Unlike our parents, however, we aren't surrounded by individuals who share our cultural and religious background. We exist here as a minority. The way we experience Hinduism is completely different from the way our parents did, and we have the added pressure of assimilating and being socially accepted by two communities and societies rather than one. Adding to the challenge, Hinduism is arguably the most complex religion in the world. There are an infinite number of concepts to master and ways to practice Hinduism, and no resources readily or easily available to us here. How do we find common ground or answers to our questions when no two people in the world observe Hinduism the same exact way? Understanding this dynamic allows us to accept that there is a disconnect between our generation and the one that precedes us. This is the reason we are hosting Anubhava 2017. We are now a second generation of Hindus who may have the desire to be involved or be in touch with our roots, but are often discouraged by the first generation that doesn't understand our experience, and while good intentioned, are unable to effectively guide us or answer the questions we have because of our unique experiences here. We're often judged and viewed as apathetic, when in reality, we may actually feel quite connected and have the desire to learn more, but have no idea how. This is the reason we at the temple have established Akshayam and Anubhava, and today this conference is about you, our Hindu young professionals. We want you to learn, ask questions, and hopefully discover something about yourselves. And for the members of our supportive older generation in the room, I ask you to support us today by listening to our young people. Throughout today's conference, we will hear from guest speakers and panelists who will share glimpses not only into their careers, but also into how Hinduism has shaped their lives and work. I'm now truly honored to introduce His Holiness, Swami Vivekananda, who will be inaugurating today's conference with an inspiring talk. His Holiness is a dynamic young monk of the Ramakrishna Mission and is now furthering the incredible legacy of the Vedanta Society. Most of you may not know that Swamiji has a degree in business management. We're fortunate to have him here because he understands better than most the challenges of being a young professional in today's world. His Holiness was appointed as resident Swami at the prestigious Vedanta Society of New York earlier this year and is now based right here in Manhattan. And for those of you who haven't heard of this, the Vedanta Society is a historic organization that has many chapters throughout the US, and the original chapter is based right here on the Upper West Side, where it was originally founded by Swami Vivekananda in 1894. The Vedanta Society bases its teachings on the system of Vedanta, which means viewing Hinduism conceptually and philosophically by drawing directly from the ideas represented in the Upanishads. Please welcome His Holiness, Swami Vivekananda.
Om Sthapakaya Dharmasya Sarva Dharma Swarupini Avatar Varishthaya Ram Krishnaya Te Namah. A very good morning to all of you, and I'm very happy to be here just in time. I remember when we were students, they taught us a concept of just-in-time management, JIT they used to call it, and we arrived just because of heavy traffic in Manhattan and here just in time for this program. But I'm happy to be here, and I would like to congratulate the organizers of Anubhava. And Raval, you must keep track of the time. Let me know when I'm out of time. When we studied communications, our teachers told us that there's an art of beginning a talk and an art of ending a talk. And often my students tell me, Swami, you have mastered the first one, the art of beginning a talk. So time management is important. Many years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, in Calcutta, in the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture in Gold Park, there's an annual course on Indology. And I was asked to give the opening talk for that course. Now I was taken aback. To give a talk on Indology, you have to be a profound scholar of many branches of learning. So I said, I'm not a scholar, you should get somebody who is a Pandit, who is going to talk, and the inaugural lecture, the idea was, what is Indology and why study Indology? And the organizers told me, that's precisely why we are calling you. We want a person to think afresh from the point of view of a lay person. Why study Indian heritage? What can it do for you? So I started thinking, and of all the points that I gathered and what I said to that class, and I think I did a good job because they kept inviting me each year then afterwards. I'll share just 5 points with you today. The subject is, why study Indian heritage? Why is the Indian heritage important? And what can it do for us? This context is very different and very interesting. Here you have Hindu immigrants to the United States, and also young people who have grown up, children of Hindu parents who have grown up in the United States. So it's a very different group, and here also I can see it's a very composite group, different kinds of people. Let's see how that works here. The first thing is, why study Indian heritage? What does Indian heritage do for you? In this group, I think the most important thing, the first point which we should consider is, who am I? The question of identity. Am I an Indian? Am I an American? Am I a Hindu? What am I? Am I an atheist? Am I a mixture of many things? I often am called upon by exasperated parents, first generation migrants, to talk to their kids. And I have been in educational institutions for the last 20 years in the Ramakrishna order, so I sort of know the body language of especially sullen and rebellious teenagers. And I see it all the time. It breaks my heart, but I have to tell the parents that you're doing it all wrong. I remember we have a monk who grew up here, a son of Indian immigrants, but he studied in Berkeley, got a PhD in UC Berkeley and all, and then he became a monk in our order. So I said, what attracted you to Hinduism? Was it your parents? He said, and this is common for a lot of reactions I get from children of immigrants here. And this is important for both immigrants and the children, both kinds of people present here. He said to me, my mom and dad dragged me and my sister from Hindu temple to Hindu temple, from festival to festival, and I hated it. I didn't like it at all. I don't know what was going on. I felt it was not cool at all. It's only when I started exploring myself, like Rabali said, people are interested. The children are interested. When I started exploring myself and finding out the answers for myself, I found how rich, how profoundly deep this tradition is. And then I became fascinated and ultimately became a monk. You see, here you are Americans, those who have become American citizens, or you are born here, so you are either by citizenship or by birth, you are Americans, but with an Indian heritage. This should be, or it is in fact, your real identity. You have an enormous heritage. It's like having $1 billion in the bank and you are a billionaire, but the problem is you don't know which bank and where do you get that $1 billion. You have no access to it. So you're living on welfare. You're a billionaire, yeah, as a matter of fact you're a billionaire, but in practice you're living on welfare. So it's like that. You have this enormous heritage, but no access to it. Where are the keys to it? Your heritage, your identity, you're Americans with an enormously rich heritage, the Indian heritage. The most ancient civilization and the youngest civilization, they meet in you. The world's largest democracy and the world's most advanced democracy, the world's most powerful material civilization, they meet in you. This combination of the ancient and modern, you don't know how good you have it actually. You are enormously rich in terms of culture. So this is the identity which we all share. And the point is to make ourselves aware of it and enrich ourselves with it. And then I come to the second point, transmit it to the next generation, to your children or your children's children. This transmitting the cultural heritage from one generation to another, it's an enormously important reason for studying and investigating and protecting your Indian heritage. I often see, again and again, throughout this country, in Canada, in Europe, the large Indian immigrant populations very worried about the next generation of children. They are worried partly for the wrong reasons. The wrong reason, I'll tell you what the wrong reason is. The wrong reason is they want the children to be like themselves. And I tell them that's not a good idea. That's not an authentic project. They're not going to be like you. They are going to be Americans or Canadians or Europeans. They are. But what you can do genuinely for them, you should accept it. I tell the parents, you should accept it. It's good. They are going to be global citizens. But you can give them roots in Indian culture. Transmit it. And then we come to the next big problem. To transmit something, you need to have it yourself. And in most cases, Indian parents do not have it. They grew up in a sort of integral synthetic environment where they imbibed it automatically. They didn't have to make any kind of major effort for it. But the problem with that kind of culture is you don't know how to hand it over. And I see that again and again, parents making a mistake in trying to hand it over, sort of forcing the kids into doing something, and immediately the kids rebel. The lucky few who strike out on their own and investigate it for themselves, they get something out of it. So that's the second reason why one should study and protect your Indian heritage, to hand it over to the next generation. But we come to the third reason, which is the most important one. I mean, if there's one thing that I would have to tell you, it would be this one. The fundamental questions of life, the most important questions in life. I will tell you openly, without any kind of hedging, the best answers that humanity has ever come across are found in your Hindu heritage, are found in your Upanishads, are found in your Bhagavad Gita, in the Yoga Sutras, in Indian philosophy. The fundamental questions of life. What is the reality about myself? Does God exist? What is the purpose of life? How do I attain that purpose of life? What is spiritual practice? What benefit does it give to me and to society? These questions, fundamental questions of life, the big questions of life, the meaning of life, the purpose of life, these questions have the finest answers I have come across. I have studied widely across the secular and spiritual literatures of the world, and I have not come across any texts anywhere close to, say, for example, the Upanishads. So those things are there, and that is something that we need to cultivate. Arthur Schopenhauer, great German philosopher, he said, I consider the study of these Upanishads. He studied a Latin translation of a Persian translation of the Sanskrit original. The Sanskrit original translated, a very fascinating story how the Upanishads came to the West. The Sanskrit original was translated at the behest of a Mughal prince, Dara Shukla, the elder brother of Aurangzeb. He wanted to study it. He got it translated. And that was recovered by one young Frenchman, Anquetil Duperron, who got it from India and took it to France. And then he translated it into Latin and published a book called Upnikat. And that came into the hands of Schopenhauer. And he says, I consider the study of these Upanishads the most beneficial study in the whole world, except perhaps the originals. It is said that after that he read a little bit of the Upanishads every day in his life. He named his he had a little dog, favorite dog, he named it Atma, the Atman. And his biographer says, draws a delightful picture of this great philosopher sitting by the fireside and brooding over deep philosophical issues with, as it's written, with the world soul, Atma, world soul, sitting and look at his feet and looking up at him adoringly. So Schopenhauer, he said, these Upanishads have been the solace of my life and will be the solace of my death. We do not know how much of American thought at its source has been influenced by Indian thought. There's one book I would recommend to you, American Veda, by Philip Goldberg, American Veda. Do read it. He talks about how Hinduism came to America. And he starts with the place I come from, Swami Vivekananda and the Vedanta Society. But even before Swami Vivekananda came here, the famous World Parliament of Religions in Chicago, even before that, the Transcendentalists, just close by in Massachusetts here, Emerson, Thoreau, Walt Whitman. Emerson's biographer says, Emerson can be regarded as the mind of, Ralph Waldo Emerson, can be regarded as the mind of America. And a good part of that mind was influenced by Hindu thought. He had the most well-stocked library of Hindu literature in America in those days, which does not mean much, but several books. He read the Gita. Thoreau, in his famous time at Walden, if some of you have gone to Walden Pond, he read the Bhagavad Gita every day when he was in his well-known retreat at Walden Pond. Walt Whitman, his poetry is suffused with the ideas of the Gita and the Upanishads. So even before Vivekananda came here, and after Vivekananda, through the work of my predecessors at the Vedanta Society, when there were almost no Indians, it was run entirely by Americans, and one Indian Swami would come from India to stay and teach here. Through the work of many prominent American intellectuals, these ideas of the Upanishads percolated in American society. Christopher Isherwood, he wrote the famous Ramakrishna and his Disciples, very good book. Aldous Huxley. Then in New York itself, Joseph Campbell, who wrote on mythology. He was a disciple of Swami Nikhilananda. Just to give you one example, just one example, Star Wars. Star Wars, yes, I can see smiles coming on the faces of many people. If you Google Star Wars and Vedanta, immediately you'll have lots of hits because George Lucas knew Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was a disciple of Swami Vivekananda and heavily influenced by Vedantic thoughts, a lot of which he transmitted to George Lucas and a lot of which became things in the Star Wars series of movies. Yes, Brahman becomes the force. And there's so many very interesting things. You look up our website recently, Professor Jeffrey Long of Elizabethtown University, he gave a very interesting talk in the Vedanta Society. The yoga of, wait for it, the yoga of Yoda. He teaches a whole course in Elizabethtown University about Star Wars and Vedanta. The entire, so a lot of things in popular culture which people do not know about can be traced back to Indian thought. Yoga, of course, every street corner in Manhattan has a yoga studio. And I think next week or so we'll celebrate the World Yoga Day, 21st June. I think there's a program here too, probably. So, yoga came into US in a big way from great Indian teachers, different traditions of yoga. And many people do not know. I was giving a talk in a school in LA once, and one of the kids, when I spoke about yoga, one of the kids, an American kid, asked, "Oh, you have yoga in India too?" In India too, just imagine. So, the effect of Indian thought on America is not recognized, but it's there. It's sort of in the mass culture all around us. But we must discover that. That's another role that we have to play to channel this thought, to channel these ideas into the wider American society and culture. The Upanishads, how am I doing? I have time. The Upanishads, to put it briefly, they tell you that your real nature is divine. Tat Tvam Asi. You can say, I know I am divine. Well, not in that sense. Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art. You are one with God. You are not a mere creature of physical, like a body and a mass of flesh and bone, born today and destined to die tomorrow. No. You are not even the mind, a stream of ideas and thoughts and emotions streaming through you. You are the witness consciousness, an immortal spirit beyond body and mind. And the purpose of life is to realize this. You might say, that's not my purpose. My purpose is to earn $1 million. Here in Manhattan, you say, I want to earn $1 million in Wall Street. I was in California until last year, in Hollywood. And there people would say, my aim in life is not to realize God or anything. I want to become a movie star in Hollywood. Whatever you want to become, a multimillionaire or a movie star or whatever the American dream you want to achieve, whatever you want to become, the Upanishads tell us, consciously or unconsciously, you are striving towards the spiritual realization, towards God realization. What you think is going to give you happiness and peace and joy, that's what you're moving towards. That you're doing it unconsciously. Sooner or later we realize it does not lie outside us. We turn inwards. When you do it consciously, you say the person is spiritual. You do it unconsciously, you say the person is just leading his or her life. That's just life. But it is the same pursuit. The Upanishads tell us, Gita tells us, ultimately the purpose of life is not wealth, the purpose of life is not pleasure, the purpose of life is not even doing good or politics, the purpose of life is spiritual enlightenment, moksha, spiritual freedom. But Hinduism is not world denying. 4 goals of human life, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So how to lead a good, beneficial, peaceful, joyful life in this world and how to attain spiritual illumination. These are fundamentally the two fundamental teachings of Hinduism. How do you attain this? And I don't have the time to go into it, but in the Gita and the Upanishads you will find the various paths to enlightenment. There's the path of meditation, Raja Yoga. Swami Vivekananda wrote his classic Raja Yoga here in New York. The book Raja Yoga was written here. There's the path of bhakti. In fact, the temples, mostly you'll see images and worship and music and bhajans. The path of love towards God. Bhakti yoga. There's the path of knowledge. Who am I? I try to realize that I am I the body, am I a mind, am I a body-mind complex, or something beyond it, the Atman which the Upanishads speak about, Jnana Yoga. How do I convert my day-to-day activities into spiritual practice, into spiritual striving? Karma Yoga. So different yogas, different paths of spiritual practice have been delineated in these Upanishads. Quite apart from spiritual enlightenment, which might seem very abstract and high, though it is not actually. It's something that we should all strive for in the midst of our day-to-day lives. Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, 2 minutes, in the Bhagavad Gita, when he was taught Vedanta by Krishna, he said, I don't want to fight this battle, I want to go and realize God or become enlightened. And Krishna said, you have to fight the battle of life. And only by that you will realize, you will get the enlightenment you are seeking for. So there is no divorce between the life that you lead in the world and spiritual life. It's one and the same life. That's taught in the Upanishads. There are practical benefits to this. Practical benefits right now in this world. Yoga, enormous benefits. Indians are not as much interested in yoga as other Americans are, I think. It's more popular here than in India. Whether it is stress management, whether it's development of concentration, whether it's good integral health, there is no one wonderful system. The most beneficial, best system that has been discovered till date is the various schools of yoga from India. So that's there. I see modern psychology, positive psychology, the work done by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in Flow, if you have come across that book, about attention, about concentration. In 2 full pages, he talks about the Patanjali Yoga. He says that that's the most sophisticated system for attaining flow that I have come across. Martin Seligman, when he says that the key to happiness, you read his book, Authentic Happiness, key to happiness, happiness has 3 components. Pleasure is one component, engagement is another component, and meaning or purpose in life is another component. Meaning of life, engagement in life, and pleasure. And most important is meaning or purpose. Second one is engagement. Pleasure is a small component. If you map it into the ancient Indian idea of dharma, artha, kama. See, kama, pleasure. Pleasure. Artha, the pursuit of worldly success. Engagement. And dharma, moral life, religious life, purposeful life. Again, purpose and meaning in life. You see, exactly it maps. It goes beyond that in the quest for moksha also. So in all these ways, there are enormous, wonderful insights into human welfare, into human thriving, which you find in our heritage. And all of that is yours, it's there for the taking. One last point I'll mention and I'll stop, which is very relevant to today's world. Hinduism, as she mentioned, is enormously diverse. I was giving a talk, an introductory talk on Hinduism to a group of American students. They're all non-Hindus, non-Indians, who had very little idea about Hinduism. And to give them an idea about the diversity of Hinduism, I said you take all the hundreds of different Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, all of it together into one Christian religion, add to it all the sects of Islam, add to it all the different varieties of Judaism, and make one mega Abrahamic faith. Think about it. And so the eyes are growing wider, you know. So that will be one mega religion. Think about it, how big and diverse it will be. Hinduism is more diverse than that. You put all of it together and you compare it with Hinduism, Hinduism is more diverse than that. Enormous variety. People believing in God, people who do not believe in God, people who worship God as male, people who worship God as female, people who worship God with form and without form, and in enormous ways, in enormously diverse ways. And that has always been true in India. What it led to was Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise speak of it differently. Great deal of tolerance, universality, flexibility in Hinduism. So the Hindus in general are very adaptable, very tolerant, very accepting of other different ideas. When you grow up in a village where Shiva is also worshipped, Devi is also worshipped, Vishnu is also worshipped, and you respect all and still stick to your own practice, it prepares you for accepting a Christian, it prepares you for accepting a Muslim or a Jew, or prepares you for accepting an atheist or somebody who is synthetic. You see, So that attitude is enormously important for today's world. In a multicultural world, multi-ethnic world, where plurality and diversity has to be accepted and managed and synthesized within yourself. Hinduism has, I would say, the best resources. I mean, I could speak more about this, but you are well prepared to teach this very important message of acceptance, of tolerance, of harmony between different communities today. One more point, just one point. Rationality. Sam Harris, who is, I don't know if it might not be the right person to talk about in a temple or a church or a mosque. He's an out-and-out atheist. And I love him. I love all the atheists. Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and I delight in listening to Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. Sam Harris, he completely condemns religion. He says most of religion is superstition, of all religions. But he is very Catholic there. Every religion is mostly superstition. He makes two exceptions. He says, I'm quoting from the book, The Waking Up. If you look it up in Amazon, Waking Up, Sam Harris. He says, except two. He says, I make an exception of Advaita Vedanta, the Hindu philosophy of non-dual Vedanta, and in Tibetan Buddhism, Dzogchen Buddhism, which the Dalai Lama teaches. He says, these are the two traditions in which there is a core of undeniable truths. Who is saying this? One of the most outspoken, radical, modern atheists today. If you try to find where he lives, you cannot find, because he is it's secret, it's kept confidential, because he feels he might be killed any day by religious fundamentalists. But he clearly says that if you subject it to all the tests of rationality, of scientific evidence, you cannot deny that in Advaita Vedanta and in Dzogchen Buddhism, these two important traditions coming out of India, there is a core of truth. So, these are the points I wanted to lay before you. One, for the sake of your identity, you need to know what you are, who you are. Two, for the sake of handing it over to the next generation. Three, the most fundamental questions in life, the big questions in life, answers are there. Best answers that humanity has come across. Four, practical benefits from yoga, Ayurveda, and so on. You get all of that from the Indian heritage. And five, this harmony, this flexibility, tolerance, and rationality that you get from your Hindu heritage. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best for the rest of the day's conference. I think it's a wonderful idea, and you should have more of this and more of such educational programs. Congratulations to the organizers. A big hand to the organizers from Anubhava. Thank you. Thank you.
Joining us today. Your work is truly inspiring, and it's really great to have you. So I really wanted to hear more. Can you please tell us more about the gender gap in technology? What is holding women back?
Sure. So basically, right now, less than 18% of computer science majors are women. And there's about 500,000 open jobs in computing and technology. Studies show that almost 45% of the things that we do every day have the potential to be automated in the next 5 years alone. And America graduated about 40,000 computer science graduates last year, of which 7,000 were women. And you compare that to China, which graduated about 350,000 engineers last year alone. So you have this kind of massive problem happening where the economy is changing. You have all these open jobs. Our universities are not preparing our young people to go into these jobs in the future. And in particular, we're having this enormous decline when it comes to women. So this wasn't always the case. The pioneers of computer science and computers were actually women. ENIAC women, Ada Lovelace, Grace Hopper. In the 1980s, if you walked into any computer science class or into a gaming camp, summer camp, it would have been 40% girls and 60% boys. Today, that number is less than 18%. So at a time where you have so much influence of technology on our everyday world, and at a time where American women are now 45% of all breadwinners, you're having a decline of women that are going into this field.
And how did your path lead you to found Girls Who Code?
I am totally a weird person to start this organization. You know, my parents came here as refugees from Uganda in 1973. They were 2 of 1,000 refugees who got status to come here, namely because they were engineers. And in the 1970s, this country was desperately seeking engineers. And even though my father, they were both trained engineers when they came to this country, my mother sold cosmetics, my father worked as a machinist, but they loved this nation. And no matter how tired my father was, he would come home every night and he'd read to me about Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi and Eleanor Roosevelt. And I knew then from a very young age that I wanted to give back. We were one of the few Indian families in our community. We lived in a suburb outside of Chicago. It was the 1980s. You know, if my mother wore a sari to the local Kmart, she'd get harassed. Our house was frequently TP'd or egged and spray painted. I got into my first fight when I was 12 years old, and I was called a Haji at school, and I probably couldn't take it anymore, and I agreed to, you know, fight back. And so I really had this kind of identity crisis when I was probably 12 or 13, where to that point, I was, you know, going to the local Kmart every day, hoping to find, you know, one of those keychains that had Reshma on it instead of Sally or Sue or Beth or Tom. And I thought, that the way to survive in my community was to pretend to be white. And, you know, I realized at 13 that no matter what, I was a Hindu, I was Indian, I was a woman, and I was brown. And I better actually start educating people that, no, you're not born with a dot on your head, you know, and what about Hinduism is, instead of hiding from who I was. And I had that revelation at 13, and I started an organization called the Prejudice Reduction Interested Students Movement, mouthful, PRISM, and a nice acronym. But from that moment, I've been an activist. And I've been an activist fighting for my community, fighting for young people, fighting for women. And so, you know, I came to this problem. I ran for office. I was the first Indian American woman to run for Congress here in New York City, my district, which had a little piece of Queens. And it was the best experience of my life. I lost. But sometimes I always say, you know, what's your dharma, right? What has God put you on this earth to do? And I really much feel that I was put on this earth to do public service, and it may not have been through politics at that moment, but in that experience, I saw the technology divide in schools, because as a politician, you end up going and visiting a lot of schools. And I was struck by the lack of young girls in these programs and wanted to do something about it.
You know, that keychain moment you mentioned, I think everyone can relate to that at some point. I remember that something standing out when I was young as well. Yeah, can you tell us specifically a little bit more about learning Hinduism growing up? Like, were you very involved in the religion and learning?
I think I'm kind of like probably a lot of people here. I was, you know, dragged to satsangs and, you know what I mean, into temples. But I also, from a very young age, I've always loved God. Like, I've always felt at home in a temple. We obviously had a temple, a little temple at home. I have one in my home now, and so I've always identified with being a Hindu. It's not something I felt like, maybe I loved being dragged around. It's not something that I feel like I came into as an adult. I feel like I came into as an adult really understanding our religion more, and reading the Bhagavad Gita. You know, being, you know, I actually love yoga and meditation, and it's a practice in my life. My son Sean, you know, we try to take him to temple, you know, once a month, you know, once every other month. I'm now really, you know, frustrated that I live in Chelsea, in Manhattan, and there's no Hindu temple. We always have to drive here, you know, to Queens, and that's something I want to do something about. So I've always been. You know, I think I find a lot of comfort from religion, and I find a lot of comfort in my destiny from religion. I'm a big advocate of failure. I fail at things all the time. I get rejected at things all the time. I have very big eyes in terms of my own ambitions, and my ambitions for the world. And I think when I start feeling burnt out or I question, you know, I come back to God.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that really leads into my next question, and something that's been kind of a theme so far in today's conference, this idea of how there's a huge difference in the way the previous generation has practiced Hinduism and how we are practicing Hinduism now. now you're a parent. So what have you realized about your experiences as a kid learning Hinduism, and how are you helping your own kids now navigate this?
It's going to be harder. It feels as though, and I'm interested, Swami, what you have to say about this, but it feels as though society has moved away from religion. And I think at a time where there's so much crisis and discrimination and pain, it feels like we need to move towards religion. So we have to be much more intentional. I have to be much more intentional about exposing my son, you know what I mean, to our religion, than I felt like my parents had to. You know, there was a temple, you know, there was a community everywhere. And so it was easy to do that. It feels harder. And so we have to be, as parents, I think, much more conscious and intentional about it. We're also living at a time right now where, you know, in some ways it feels like there's so much more vitriol. You know, I talk about how in the 1980s, you know, my house was TP'd, and, you know, it felt like I was constantly bullied at school, or my family was, and then that went away, right? And you felt like things had really shifted and changed, and now it feels like that's come back again. You know, I'm you know, very active and in how I feel about this current administration, and my Facebook page will get decimated with "Go back to your own country." You know what I mean? You don't belong here. You know, you're a terrorist. And that language has not, you know what I mean, in the past, I would say 20 years, was not really normal. And now it feels like people feel very comfortable expressing their views. And I think that's something that as Hindus we have to really, we're back, I feel, at trying to educate people about our culture and our religion than we have been.
Yeah, I think, totally agree with you. There's been this major shift in the last year or so, and you know, things that we haven't seen in a decade or more are starting to come back, these mentalities, this hatefulness. So really, as you said, it's more important than ever to educate others and represent our Hinduism and our heritage, you know, in a way that people can understand. And so I guess coming back to career, how do you integrate the two? How do you represent yourself as a Hindu, as Indian, and American? How do you tie that into the workplace?
Well, I mean, I've been thinking a lot about, I'm writing a book about bravery. I did a TED Talk about how girls are raised to be perfect and boys are raised to be brave. And I have been thinking a lot about how, you know, oftentimes, I think this is a part of our culture too, is like we chase pedigrees and credentials. Right, from a very young age, I'm sure all your parents were telling you to go to MIT or Harvard or Yale or somewhere, right, graduate at the first of your class and just be the best, be the best, be the best, be the best. And I think in that process, we have forgotten to get joy from our work and to really understand, why are we doing that? What's the difference we want to make in our life? What's the impact? And we spend our time chasing pedigrees and credentials. And that can lead you very off path. It certainly did for me. You know, I graduated first in my class at college at the University of Illinois. I was mad that I had to go to a state school because I'd gotten into another school that my parents didn't have the money or resources to pay for. I, you know, went to Harvard and got my master's. I was obsessed with going to Yale Law School. I applied once and didn't get in, twice and didn't get in, third time didn't get in, and then finally took a train to the New Haven where the school is and like convinced the dean to let me in after a year of committing to getting into being first in my class at Georgetown. Crazy. I was obsessed. Eventually went to Yale Law School, and then, you know, thought I wanted to go to Yale so I could be a public servant, but then ended up graduating Yale Law School with $300,000 in student loan debt and worked in finance. And was, you know, there when the economic crisis happened, was doing everything that I was not put on this earth to do, all because I was chasing a pedigree and a credential. And so I think that, so for me, when I ran for office, it was a crazy thing to do. I was an Indian woman named Reshma Sajani in a city or a country where we had no elected officials that were Indian or Hindu. You know, that was pre-Tulsi Gabbard, pre-Ro Khanna, right? And I ran against a woman who had been there for 18 years, again in a city where we had no elected officials that looked like any of us in this room, still doesn't. And it was the best experience of my life because it was an act of bravery. And instead of chasing pedigrees and credentials, I was chasing a dream and chasing a desire to be a public servant. And that experience, even though I lost miserably, the best thing that ever happened to me. My career, my life skyrocketed because now I chase joy and meaning, you know, instead of pedigrees and credentials. And I think I found that clarity from my religion. I am very centered about what my impact is going to be on the world. And I'm not stressed out about it, or I'm not chasing it. I feel aligned. And I think sometimes they say, you know, when you feel aligned in the universe about where you're supposed to be, things come much easier.
Yes, I think that makes complete sense, especially what you're saying about pedigrees. I think most people in this room can relate to that dream that our parents have for us, which is go to Harvard, become a doctor, and, you know, become a neurosurgeon, actually. So everyone can really relate to that, and it's so true. There's so many different fields, career paths now, and, you know, basically pursuing what makes you feel aligned, I think makes the most sense. So now I'd really like to open this up to the audience, and we'd love to hear questions from you that you'd like to ask Reshma. So if you could please pass your index cards forward, and then we can...
Namaste Reshmaji, my name is Parth. Thank you so much for your talk. I wanted to ask you, as someone who's working to empower girls in the community, what are some examples of the traditions within Hinduism or specific female characters, female forms of divinity within Hinduism that particularly inspire or speak to you when you're doing this type of work or just in your daily life?
It's a great question. I mean, I feel like we have our own Wonder Woman with like Radha and Sita, right? We have very strong female characters or female leaders, you know, both in our religion and our culture. I mean, I think that that's kind of the interesting dynamic. You know, we had Indira Gandhi. We've had strong women, you know, even in politics in India. I mean, I grew up with a very strong mother in my household, and with a father who didn't tell me that I had to do certain things. Besides maybe get married by the time I was 22, which didn't work out, but. I was very free to, you know, to be me and to excel and to be a leader. And so I take a lot of the way that I was raised as what I tell other people on how to raise their children. Like, none of us were coddled, right? Like, when we got an A on something, no one congratulated us. We didn't get like a $10 bill, right? I can be on the New York Times 5 times in 1 week and my father will never congratulate me. He'll tell me, oh, this is what you should have done differently. You know, when I lost my election, my dad was literally sent me an email the next day being like, here are the 10 things you should have done differently. You know, there's no, you know, care package, right? No tears, no hugs, none of that, right? But I think that I'm grateful for being raised that way because it's made me strong and resilient. And I'm taking many of the things that I feel like I was raised, how I was raised, which I think is very cultural, into the way I'm telling other Americans to raise their children. Because I think that, like, in some ways, there isn't a lot of, ironically, right, there's not a lot of gender differences between the ways I think Hindus raise their boys and girls, kind of. And there's obviously things we can point to. But for the most part, I think I meet a lot of very strong Indian women all the time.
All right. So the next question, a lot of Indian girls feel that they need to westernize and adhere to American traditions and standards, including beauty standards, to be able to succeed in the American workplace. How can we help them reach their career goals, but also encourage them not to let go of their Indian identities?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess I'm writing a book about this. I think that at a very young age, all girls, you know, were taught to like smile pretty and play it safe and get all A's, and you know, our parents are straightening our dresses and fixing our bows and making sure that, you know, we don't have any food on our shirt. You know, you saw my 2.5-year-old son is here, and I call him my little pig pen. He's a mess. You know, he's got a booger in his nose, his breakfast on his shirt. Like, I probably didn't comb his hair, you know what I mean, or brush his teeth last night because you know, anyway. So, but it's if you're raised that way constantly, by the time you're 15 or 16, you're feeling very constrained. You know, you're obsessed with perfection. And our boys are raised to be much more free, because from a very young age, we don't make them feel like they have to look, speak, and act perfectly. And so we need to figure out how to undo a lot of that. I mean, I think that, you know, as far as like beauty and all of that is concerned, you know, there's so much pressure on young girls, including Indian young women. And, you know, in college campuses, there's a rising suicide epidemic, which is much higher for young women than it is for young men. And we live in a society right now where you have to be a size 2, you know, captain of your soccer team and a straight A student, you know, and, you know, all of that. That's a lot. And take, you know, 900, you know, selfies on Snapchat, you know, by the end of the day. You know, and I think that that's just a ton of pressure. We need to change society that way. Listen, I think that there are a lot more South Asian role models, Indian and South Asian role models out there, from Mindy Kaling to Priyanka Chopra, you know, to, you know, Pramila Jayapal, who ran Tulsi Gabbard. Like, there's a lot more women you're seeing today, certainly than when I was growing up. And so, you know, I'm very hopeful.
And then, when you were running for Congress, did you feel as though your Indian heritage or Hindu background was more accepted and cherished, or was it frowned upon and rejected? And how did you become so brave to run?
So this is going to sound a little depressing, but you know, I ran for Congress and lost, and then I ran for public advocate of New York City, which is essentially like the deputy mayor, in 2013, and lost. And I came in third. I got 75,000 votes. I was the first, you know, Indian American woman to be endorsed by Queens County. Like, you know, raised $3 million. You know, and so I had, you know, all of these races were incredibly viable from my perspective. But what I realized when I lost my public advocate race, because in that race, I feel like I ran a great campaign. I talked about the issues that I cared about. I got some more support. When I lost that race, I felt like that it's really hard for an Indian woman to win in this city. That we live in a city that is so, in some ways, racially segregated, that, you know, it's hard when you're in a community that is, you know, less than 1% of the political population to actually win, because people vote based on their ethnic identity. And that was depressing. You know, but there were some highlights. You know, I remember I was at the voting booth, and this woman came holding my mail piece, and I said, "Who did you vote for?" And she said, "Oh, I voted for that really pretty Indian girl." I was like, "That's me." But, you know, so many people went into the ballot box, and they didn't know how to pronounce my name. They didn't know what religion I was, you know, but they liked something that they saw. And so I would say to everybody, like, the trend is in our direction, but we need to get more active. You know, when I ran for office, all of the synagogues and the mosques would host political candidates, and in the gurdwaras, right? So the Sikh community, the Muslim community, was very politically active, much more so than the Hindu community was. And so we need to start finding our voice. We need to start voting. We need to start thinking about who are local candidates here in our community that we should run. It matters. And until we do that, you know, it's going to be very, very, very challenging for candidates to run. Even candidates like me, who always came in, I was second place in the white community, I was second place in the black community, second place in the Latino community, but you still need a critical mass of our own to really, to vote and to participate if we're ever going to see someone who looks like me win.
That's absolutely right, and that's something we see here at the temple all the time. You know, we're part of this community here in Queens and New York City, and we're trying to get things done, we're trying to advocate, but it's extremely difficult. We go to all these events, community events, and we don't see a single Hindu person there, whereas we see so much representation from other religions and cultures. So it's really something to think about, and, you know, we have ownership of that voice. We have to come together.
Have we ever had an elected official come here and speak? A couple of times?
Yeah.
Like once during election time? Mostly? right? Shouldn't be that way. We should have people here, and they do that at the mosque and the gurdwaras. They don't just come on election day, trust me. It's very much part of everybody's political plan. You have to go to this gurdwara, you have to go to this mosque, you have to do this. We're not in those plans. The Hindu community is not seen as a community that we need to get on board or else you can't win. And we have to change that.
So the next question we have here is, in the world of wearing different hats, especially for women, and in the world of IT, expectations, which is high pressure productions, is that the reason for the decline of IT women entering the field? And what are the subcategories of IT where women can enter and still maintain a balance with family?
That's great. I mean, look, I think I'll take the balance of family part first. I really feel like we have to create a new model about kind of parenting and being a leader, and I try to do that with my son. He's obviously here, and I bring him everywhere. I spoke at the Women's March. He was like on my hip. He's been babysat from Michelle Obama to like Sheryl Sandberg. But part of the reason why I bring him, because it's not always fun for me, is that I need the young women in this room need to see that it's not one or the other, right? That you can actually be, a leader at the highest level and have children, and you can do it all. It's messy, but you can make it happen. But part of that means that we have to change structures and workplaces in society to make that possible. So I run a company, $20 million organization, I have a team of 50 people, and I have been very intentional about my workplace policies. So Fridays, everybody works from home. Most parents come in at 10 and they leave at 5:30 and they get back online. You will often come into our Girls Who Code office and see a baby or a child or somebody there. I mean, children and family are very much part of our community and our world, and so I have tried as a leader to basically create another type of setting. So I think that we've moved beyond the place, I think, economically, where we can expect women to be able to stay home. We're going to have to change workplaces that make daycare affordable, and that have paid leave, and that we as women and men create different perspectives for young folks. I think on the IT side, about where have women gone, culture plays a huge role. I mean, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer because I watched this movie, The Accused, which none of you probably know what I'm talking about. But there was a time period in the 70s when only 10% of doctors and lawyers were women. And today that number is over 50%. My law school class was 55% women. Any medical school class would be 55, 56% women. And that happened because of television. Ally McBeal, Grey's Anatomy, LA Law. In the 80s and 90s and 2000, we were inundated by female doctors and lawyers, and little girls said, "Me too. I want to be that." The opposite thing has happened in technology. I'm sure some of you watch Silicon Valley on HBO, right? That show. But before, it was Revenge of the Nerds and Weird Science and war games. And so we have created culturally a caricature of what it means to be an IT or a computer scientist, and it's a white male, who's kind of nerdy, and he's sitting in a basement and he's drinking a Red Bull and he hasn't showered, right? And most girls look at that image and they say, "I'm not interested." Not only do I not want to be him, I don't even want to be friends with him. So culture plays a very huge role on what we think is possible. Yeah, is that myself? So I think that I spend a lot of time in Hollywood and pitching television shows and really thinking about how do I have 13 books coming out, children's books, board books, a nonfiction series that all of you should check out on Amazon.com that teaches girls how to code. And so I've been really working on thinking about how you change culture.
Reshma, thank you so much. Thank you. And even more so now that we've had a chance to hear from you. So on behalf of the Hindu Temple Society of North America, please accept this small token of our appreciation. So Sarva Priyananda.
श्रीकान्धद्रिहिणोपपण्डितवनस्कन्देन्द्रनन्द्यादयः प्राचीना गुरवोऽभीष्य करुणा शेषाद्गदा गौरवम् तं सर्वाधिगुरुं मनोज्ञमकुटं मन्दस्मितालङ्कृतं चन्मुद्राङ्गिरमुद्रभागिनं यो वेदादो स्वरप्रोक्तो वेदान्ते च प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य यत्परश्च महेश्वरः आनन्दमानन्दकरं प्रसन्नं ज्ञानस्वरूपं निजबोधयुक्तं योगीन्द्रमीड्यं भवरोहवैद्यं श्रीमद्गुरुं नित्यमहं नमामि
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you all to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself. And I think I sent you an email saying, let's tell stories and not generalities. Like, how did you get here, or why did you choose to do what you do?
All right. Thank you for it's an honor to be here. Morning, everyone. My name is Sriram Imani. I'm the founder and CEO of Indian Raga. We're based out of Boston. So I'm the kid who grew up and going through school was always involved in every performing art possible. Theatre, speaking, Carnatic music. I trained for 10 years as a Carnatic classical vocalist, and then for 2 years in Hindustani vocals, and did everything possible, Bollywood music, band singing and everything. And when I look back upon my school life, the images that come to my mind are being backstage. So I've always wanted to be in this space. But like a good South Indian boy, I went to IIT Bombay for my undergrad. But while I was there, I was the head of Speakers Club. I was on the panel of the editorial, I was on the editorial board of the campus newsletter. I started a Hindi band. I led the college cultural festival and basically did everything except for engineering. So that's what my degree is in. So when I came to MIT, and I was really inspired by the entrepreneurial environment there. And everyone was talking about, disrupting industries and adding value and having new approaches and new innovations in everything. And to me, the only thing that seemed like is that this is this one industry that needs to really have a fresh approach. I grew up in Bombay, and I just came here like about 5 to 6 years back. And in Bombay, I think in my class of 60 students, I was the only one training in Carnatic music. And for everyone else, it was like, what is this, right? So it was so funny to me that you can grow up in India, go through school, go through work life, and not even know what a raga is. And to know that this is one of the most complex, most advanced, most structured pieces of music pedagogy that help you create your own tunes wherever you might be on the spur of the moment, is one of the most intellectually advanced and sophisticated innovations or inventions by mankind. And in our own country, us not knowing that it just bothered me immensely. Burned me, absolutely, yeah. So it really burned me from within. And did you see some other interviews?
Yes, I think.
Right? Yeah, I mean, the context there is that I was talking to I was interviewing in a bunch of places, and this guy picked up the phone and he was like, okay, Sriram, what burns you the most? And I just didn't expect that question. And the first thing I said is exactly this, that people can go through school and not even know what a raga means. So anyway, while at MIT, this is all I was talking about, and my professor was like, I think you should start this company already, what are you waiting for? So that's how Indian Raga got started. It's been 3 years that I've been doing this full time. I started that a year before when I was still a student. And what we do, and just to kind of instead of going through the regular spiel, on a good day at Indian Raga, what we do is basically bring together a group of 6 talented, bright-eyed young musicians or dancers. We teach them a piece of music, and we teach them not only how to sing it in tune, but also how to pronounce correctly, what the meaning of the words and the lines are, why it is relevant to them. And then we take them into a studio where they kind of stand in front of these mics and put on these headphones and feel very excited. Then they listen to themselves sing or play. And for the first time in their life, they realize that I'm actually not on Shruti, and that's why my parents and teacher keep asking me to practice. And then they make a mental promise to themselves that they will go back home and practice really well. Then we take them to a professional videographer who actually does a good job of like shooting them from multiple angles. We do a high quality video of this whole experience, and then we release it on Facebook and YouTube, where we have more than 15 million viewers across 65 countries in the world who watch these productions. So that's what we do at Indian Raga.
So, I mean, you know Sia, right? How many know Sia? Cheap Thrills? Go look up Cheap Thrills on Indian Raga. It's amazing. It's in my head now today. Bharati?
Hi. I think this works. Okay. Sorry. My name's Bharati, and I'm going to jump into a story of a day of my work last week. So I'm at this youth organization called Exalt Youth in the middle of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, and the organization works with, I fund this organization as part of my role within the Park Foundation. And this organization works with youth ages between 15 to 19 who have exited the criminal justice system. Now, as anyone knows, being at Rikers, or we've heard all these stories, it's not easy. And you come out scarred for life at such a young age. So this organization helps these youth with an internship. They combine an internship program, high-end internship program, with GED training in order for them to successfully graduate high school with the goal of entering post-secondary education through internship programs. And so, as part of my role as giving organizations money, we want to make sure that the organization is doing what they're supposed to be doing, programmatically and operationally. So my job is spent doing site visits in parts of Brooklyn, Harlem, the Bronx, places where probably we wouldn't set foot in normally in our daily lives. When I say where rap videos are shot, but you know, this is not Manhattan. These are not the lovely subway stations of the Upper West Side. These are subway stations that you would not, or I would not, normally walk in, even during broad daylight. And so here I am walking out. This is my life. I'm always doing site visits, always in the areas where my parents were like, "Can you please just say a prayer before you go?" And I was like, "Of course, Mama. I will say Om Bhur Bhosa before I leave my house." And so, so here I am doing my site visit, and part of it is interacting with the students who are in the program, not just meeting with the board members or the leaders, like Narashma Sajani, the executive director there. I have conversations with the senior leadership, but I also like interacting with the youth, which is what the crux of the program is. It's the meet. And so I'm wearing a bindi, which I normally used to never wear growing up. I was forced to wear it growing up because my parents forced me to, and then I stopped. And then now I restarted wearing it, and one of the students was, "What is that on your forehead?" And I started explaining what it was. And in the midst of me explaining what it was, I realized that I myself didn't realize why, and it kind of made me explore why I'm wearing this and why I do what I do. And so, I don't know if that really was it.
I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, okay.
Why you do.
Right, so, and then I realized why I do what I do. And at a very early age, having, been told to be a doctor or a lawyer, engineer, those were the three careers that even existed within my parents' realm. I realized, I was like, no, I want to help people. And I know that sounds pretty cliche, but it's actually how I ended up spending, starting at 20, I started working for Gloria Steinem and working with women's rights organizations, doing domestic violence work, which is an issue that's very close to my heart and very prevalent in our society. And so that's what led me to be in the field that I'm in. Okay.
So I'm actually going to give you guys a little bit of an anecdote on how I ended up doing what I'm doing. I remember it was actually my freshman year of college, and I was studying physics. That was my degree path. And one of the courses we had to take was linear algebra. And I remember showing up on the first day of class, and there was this young professor, and he must have been maybe in his mid-30s or so. And he had just recently immigrated from, I want to say Taiwan or Hong Kong. And he was so excited to be there in the classroom. And he'd just been in the country, I want to say, for like 6 weeks before and the like. And very enthusiastic, right? And I don't know if any of you guys have taken some of these like mid-level like math classes, right? The first 2 classes, oh sure, everything is great. You know, I totally understand. You show up to the 3rd class, you're like, whoa, what did I miss in between? And unfortunately for this professor, you know, he tried very hard, but there were times where you could see that he was literally thinking in a different language. And at some points he would, unwittingly or unknowingly, he would start writing almost in Chinese. And I remember at some point somebody raised their hand and they said, well, what is this supposed to mean? Or what are we supposed to make of this? And he said, quite honestly, I don't know how to translate this, or I don't know how to explain this to you. And one of our fellow students stood up and had to explain it to us. So something at that point, I guess, I didn't realize the importance of that singular moment until much later, but I was being taught by somebody else who was also learning the material for the first time themselves. And so I realized at that point, you know, I'm kind of on my own. Like, you know, the professor means well, and, you know, God bless his heart. I know he tried his hardest, but, you know, it didn't work out, or it didn't provide what I needed. So, of course, I started studying on my own. And before I knew it, I realized the best way for me to study was to actually teach my fellow classmates. And so we'd get together in study groups, and, you know, we'd kind of like camp out in a classroom somewhere at like 11 o'clock at night and just like make these doodles on the board, pretend like we knew what the heck we were doing, and, you know, felt really self-important. And somehow we managed to muddle our way through, but I don't know, at that moment, I guess I realized I kind of like teaching. And so I said, okay, sure, this is great, right? This is, it's a win-win for me. I'm helping out my friends. I'm also learning the material better than I would have otherwise. It's active, it's an active thought process. And somewhere along the way, I decided, well, why not monetize this, right? We were all in college. Who doesn't want a little bit of extra pocket money so that we can, you know, go out and have dinner with our friends or do whatever, right? And so I started teaching these classes, and then somewhere along the way, life happens. I was also on the track of going down into medical school and the like, and but I shifted, and I thought to myself, well, you know, I really like teaching. And so I started working as kind of like this teacher. I used to teach for like the MCATs and for the LSATs, and I loved it. I mean, I remember going every day to work and feeling excited, you know, having everybody look at me and ask questions and always being on the spot. And so I decided, you know, why not make a career out of this? So along the way, I started my own consulting group, and so basically now to transition to what a good day would be for me. So it's kind of migrated a little bit over the last 11 years or so. So it's not so much direct teaching as much as it is now kind of strategic planning. So what happens is families will come to me and they'll say, hey, look, here's my kid, right? My kid's in 8th grade, 9th grade, what have you, and I want my kid to be a doctor, or I want my kid to be a lawyer, or whatever it is. And that's usually where it starts, right? And you can see this, you can see the kid, you know how teenagers are, right? A little sullen, little, you know, closed off body language and the like, and, you know, mom and dad are saying one thing, the kid's shaking his head this way, like, no, I don't want to do that. So start to be like kind of the, you know, kind of intermediary between parents and kids. So on a good day, get to meet with a new client, sit down with them and have an honest and frank conversation about what it is that they expect for their kids, and more importantly, what do the kids expect for themselves. And I think one truism I've found that held, regardless of what the career path or educational path might be, is the parents want the best for their kids. And that really just boils down to they want their kids to be happy, right? And as soon as the kids realize what is going to make them happy, that's the most effective and efficient thing. We don't want the kids to go down a path where, you know, we've all experienced this, where our parents are sometimes working at cross purposes with what our intentions or goals are. You know, how often do we have even now, to this day, I have to work up the courage to call up my mom and dad and be like, well, I'm thinking about doing this, you know? How can a 13 or 14-year-old stand up to parents and say, no, I don't want to be a lawyer, or whatever. So on a good day, have an honest and frank conversation, sit down and kind of say, okay, so this is what you expect, this is what you're looking for, this is how we're gonna make this happen. You know, and kind of flesh out a plan, say, okay, these are the schools you're looking at, these are the programs you want to be involved in, these are different things that you can explore that you might not have considered to really figure out what it is that makes you tick and where you go. So, I mean, that would be a good day for me, so. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And, you know, I love how all of you are doing things that are sort of unexpected. It's not the three professions that are generally open to Indian kids. And I mean, I'm a mom, and I have a kid who's go away to college in 2 years, and It's, you know, she wants to be a photographer. Okay. But, you know, we grew up in a household where one's a journalist, the other's a writer, and what do you expect your kid to be? She's not going to go and do biology or, you know, become a doctor. So. But I just want, you know, I want to go into a little bit of that. Like as Hindus and in our culture, we are sort of brought up to defer to our parents, to not only parents, like we have an entire society of aunties and uncles, and this uncle in Chicago who's going to call you and yell at you, and you know, especially in this country, we've built up this amazing community of people, which is, you know, a great strength to us at most times, but can also become, you know, problematic because they are basically going to act like your family. So I would love to, and I think, you know, talk about comfort zone, like all of us are in our comfort zones. How do you step out of your comfort zone and go do something else entirely different? And you guys talked a little bit about how you got to your professions, but I would love to know, how did you decide, you know, sort of, did your parents put any pressure on you to be, you know, along a certain path, and how do you manage that, you know, sort of, and even if I think it would help people to hear that, at least, you know, how do you manage your parents, you know, yes, you talked about happiness, but they might say, I know what's best for you, you know, what's going to make you happy is something that you go in to make some money, you know.
Yeah, I can start that off. So, yeah, I mean, when I was young, definitely like coming first in class was not enough. 99 on 100 in math would be like, where did that 1 mark go? But, you know, I really appreciate that. And of course, like looking back on it right now, that's one of the reasons I think why the Indian American community also is so well organized, so successful, and I think having some pressure is a good thing.
The richest minority community in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. And more than richness, also like culturally very well endowed, like, you know, very balanced family structures, and I think there's a lot of like good things about the Indian that's worth emulating. But that aside, I do understand the struggle that happens when maybe there is a conflict. I think beyond a point, my parents stopped pressurizing me, and I started taking the pressure on myself, and they could see that. So after the first few times of coming first in my class, I tasted success, and then I did not want to fall down back again. So then my parents stopped completely, and it was just me like obsessing. There actually came a point in the 10th standard, the public exams in India, where they forcibly came and shut my books at 10 in the night, and they said, we are going out for a drive. Like, you're going to come right now, else you're going to sleep in the exam tomorrow. Then likewise, I actually, after IIT Bombay, I went into management consulting, and they were obviously paying me way more money than I needed. And 2 years down the line, and I decided that I'd like to kind of go into something different, and that's when this whole like what burns you the most happened, and I went on a trip to Ladakh, and there was no cell phone coverage, and I had this like, you know, zen moment of sitting and thinking what I want to do. All the bookish, like all the funky stuff happened, and I decided to work at the National Center for the Performing Arts in Bombay, doing as a manager of marketing and business development. And it was a 60% salary cut from my management consulting career. And I was someone who at the time loved to sort of like spend and party and do all of those things. And my dad was like, I have no idea how you're going to manage. So I actually sat down and prepared a spreadsheet. Like 1 month, each month one shampoo cost like 70 rupees, so like, you know, one soap cost X rupees, and did all of that. And I was like, you know what, I think I might still save up something. So I think as long as parents see that the child is proactively taking responsibility and not just like being a vagabond, I think I've known many Indian parents to be very reasonable with them. It's only when they feel like you're just going directionless that you end up putting a lot of pressure. So I've taken it very positively, and my parents really like, we have a great conversation about it. When they see that I'm taking responsibility, they sort of back off and they let me do my thing.
So you're talking about communication, basically, like
communication
being open, about transparent.
Yeah, and also understanding who's coming from where. So they want you to sort of be happy and not realize 10 years down the line that, oh, I should have done something differently. But if they know that you're actually thinking about all of those things right now, because when you're a teenager and if you just like shut up and just don't talk, and you know there is no communication, they don't know what's going on in your mind. And I've of course probably always been like someone who talks a lot, and maybe you should stop me now too. But so that's why we didn't have that problem. So, but I would encourage anyone who's facing this issue with managing parents, out of personal experience, and just as an anecdote, I've been hosted by 50 families across North America for a year when I was nomadic, and I've closely observed and been part of dinner table conversations with different parents and kids, and I think they all mean well, and as long as you communicate to them what you're thinking, or how you're weighing the pros and cons and what your plan is, I think parents today are very reasonable.
to New Jersey to go to Rutgers, and then chose to do economics and geology. Don't ask me about the geology. And you know, my parents, like any typical Indian family, we went to India every year, and so at Trichy. And of course, in India, economics then gets converted to my family members as BCom. And in India, BCom is something that, as my dad politely put, the major that women who wanted to get married off majored in. So it was literally like you didn't do well in school and you didn't get first, whatever, however they do their educational system there, which is very fine. But BCom was the last year. And so automatically, you know, I know Tamil and everything, and so people would, my aunts and uncles' faces would be drawn like this somber look, and I'd ask my Appa, why are they so sad about my major? And so my dad explained to me, I was like, oh, so they think I'm dumb. Yes. So, which then just motivated me more, right? And so, of course, grad school was not an option. As we all know, it's mandatory in our culture. And so, remember boldly deciding to go to Baruch because they paid for everything, and I didn't believe in paying for school, as I just don't believe in that. So, moved out here, actually. It all comes full circle. Moved out to Flushing, the street from here, and down the street from here, and decided to do public policy. Oh my God, another like black sheep major. And, and so my parents were like, you know, at this point, they knew that they could not. I was just very adamant about what I was gonna do. I, you know, figured after I went to the pro-choice march in DC, I was like, I wanna change law, much like Rashma, I was like, I want to go into politics, and I want to like make change in a positive way. And so managing parents till this day, once I got some sort of, for my parents, for my dad, especially Gloria Steinem was one of his, you know, for some reason he gravitated towards her. And when I told him I got an internship at this foundation, I'm working for Gloria Steinem, then it became like, okay, you're fine. As long as they can like tell people, oh, you know, she's not a doctor, engineer, lawyer, or whatever, but she works for Gloria Steinem. Most Indians still didn't know who she was, but at least it gave them some sort of sense of validity, you know. And I don't mean to mean that in a pejorative way, but you know, then they sort of said yes, and you know, they became proud of something that I did. And so I'm still to this day, and then when I went into the Clark Foundation, they were proud to say, you know, my daughter, you know, does good. They still don't know the logistics of it, which is fine, but you know, when they explain it, or when I, you know, talk to my parents about it, that's how I, you know, I talk to them about my daily, I go to charter school visits. My dad was an educator for 50 years, so I get to talk to them about this kind of stuff, which that's my connection. So it's being able to connect to my parents every day. I talk to them and I'm like, Dad, guess what I did? I went to med school, and so it's kind of like connection.
That's also giving them an entry through familiar things, right? School, you know, everybody understands students and doing good for others and, you know, things like that. But if you go into like public policy, law, I want to fight this one or that one, maybe that's not the right route to take.
Exactly, right.
Well, I was going to say, first off, your lament about your daughter wanting to study photography, I could totally understand.
I'm not lamenting, I'm just kidding.
Well, so you've accepted it, so you've come to terms with it. Yeah. I mean, so for me, I mean, of course, you know, like when I was growing up, I think my parents' expectation was I was going to become a doctor, right? And I remember, you know, my parents were both very involved in my education. I remember my dad would, even when I was in like elementary school, take time to sit down with me. He would look over my homework. He would sit down with me with the New York Times. We would discuss articles. And he never really, you know, I don't think he ever really addressed me as a kid, per se. He kind of always just treated me like an equal, you know, treated me like a peer. And he would challenge me to, you know, articulate my reasons why I believed what I believed. And fast forward a little bit, you know, both my parents were extremely well educated, and my dad's an engineer. And I'm convinced to this day, I'm sure if I was doing some kind of math or science, he could look over my shoulder to this day and still point out the mistakes that I'm making, you know? So that was a challenge. But to point, I think, so why did my parents want me at that time to become a doctor? It really boils down to a duty of care, I would say. So they felt that, you know, there is something, some quality that I had, and they felt that that would be best parlayed in the form of care to others. And for them, that was, you know, at that time directly, you know, physically providing care as a doctor. But I think where they kind of realized that so now I'm doing the same thing, not as a doctor, but I'm taking care of children's educations and essentially their futures as well. And so for them, I think that's where they realized we have common interests. My execution of the ultimate end goal might have been different from what they envisioned, but I think that they were very, it took them a little while, but I think they came to terms with the fact that, okay, your solution wasn't what we expected. And yeah, I mean, I think in terms of managing my parents, I never really thought of it as managing my parents. I kind of just always thought of it as, like you have to have a rational argument, not argument, but a rational explanation. If you can justify and articulate your position and why you believe what you believe, they'd be like, okay, And that, I think, maybe is unique. I can definitely tell you a lot of my friends who are Indian didn't have that. They definitely had the directive. It was like, the word of God has spoken through me, and this is what you're going to do, or I will put the fear of God into you, kind of a thing. No, I don't think I had that quite so much. So, but yeah, and it's fascinating to me now because that's exactly what I do, which is help kids manage their parents. And I hate to put it that way, but that's true, and I think it's tough. And we'll speak more about this, but I think part of what we were talking about, part of what my sister had mentioned in her opening address is that there is obviously a generational gap. And from an education perspective, I'll tell you more about that later, but I mean, that's kind of my take on this.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it to questions in about 5 minutes. But I also wanted to, I mean, all of you, have come to your professions with great passion. Like you for music, you for doing, helping others, social justice perspective, and you from just loving education. And I mean, I've been fortunate too in that I'm doing what I love, which is writing and teaching, and also doing I do a lot of social justice work too, meaning on my own time. And so that is of course there, but there's the nitty-gritty, the everyday. So I would love, for you to talk a little bit about what don't you like, and how do you deal with it? Yeah, I mean, what is hard?
I'll start this one off.
How do you deal with it, of course, yes.
It's very salient. The hardest thing is to tell somebody no. And more specifically, I mean, I hate to put it to you this way, but it's like if I have to go into and tell a kid or a family, like, yeah, I know what you want to do, but no, it's not going to happen the way you think it's going to happen. Not because of lack of aptitude or ability, but because I firmly believe in, from my experience, that that's not the right choice. That's very hard. And that's what I don't like to do, right? Because for me personally, saying no is very difficult. I know that that's one of my characteristics, that's one of my flaws, and something I know about myself. But it takes on a new meaning. So like getting on that phone and calling up a parent and saying, yeah, I thought about what you were saying, and there's no way it's gonna happen. It's really tough because you get the pushback, right? Some parents will get upset and they'll be like, well, well, what do you know, kind of a thing. Other parents are heartbroken and they're like, oh, really? Why is it gonna work, kind of a thing. So that's the hardest part, but sometimes that's also where you make the most progress, and that's when you get the best results too. So it's like a mixed blessing. So that's what I would say in the nitty-gritty. Yeah, I don't like making those phone calls. That's mine.
Thank you. Yeah.
I would also, to kind of piggyback and use that same parallel, it is saying no to an organization that I cannot fund. In the world of funding nonprofits, especially in this economic climate in post-2008 economic correction, nonprofits have had to do more, increasingly more, with less. And that is a sad aspect of our society where nonprofits are expected to do the work of governments, what government services are supposed to help, support and cover, but nonprofits are carrying the burden and the onus of that. So for me, I have a love for nonprofits. I mean, I actually, it's the geekiness in me. And to be able to have to say, no, I cannot fund you, you have to, and I offer a lot of technical assistance, which is a kind of parlance which I don't like to use in non-foundation world, but I tell them, sorry,
Do you?
yes, exactly. So I let them know, come back next year. This is what you can do in the meantime, and I can can help you get there operationally or programmatically, how you can improve your outcomes. So if you have a youth after-school youth program, it's a college-bound program, and only 10% of your students are getting into college, that's a problem. You know, like, yes, you are helping and you're doing good, and yes, you are doing God's work. This isn't gonna cut the mustard, right? So it's saying no, but part of saying no is actually helping them do better.
Yeah, it's looking at failure and saying, okay, what's the next?
To channel rush way, exactly.
I'll keep it short. So I think the only thing that I don't really like about what I do is no one wants to read emails anymore. Like, everybody wants to get on a call and just talk. And somehow everyone feels like getting on a call with me would probably provide a better opportunity for their child. And I'm like, no, that's not the organization I run. So trying to convince them that all information is on the website, it is exactly what it is. You don't have to call me and tell me that they won the local New Jersey, like, Simana competition, or they won this and all of that. I don't need to know all that. Like, we're a very meritocratic organization. And that's probably the only thing I don't like. So it's ironic that managing my own parents has become easy, but managing other people's parents is what is actually challenging.
You're dealing with other people's parents all day, right? So one last question, and this is something that came off what Reshma was saying. This is something I believe as living in today's world, that and what she said was, as Indians, as Hindus, we seem to be still siloed in our own little worlds, and we are not sort of reaching out and building alliances, not only with, and by alliances I'm saying with other religions, with other organizations, with other people of color, all that. So I'm wondering if, in your own, say, personal life, or as people, as leaders in your organizations, are you working with any of that? Are you trying to do any of that? I would love to have your thoughts on that, really.
I'm going to take this just because I'm overzealous. In my personal life, I try to channel Swami says. I'm not going to pronounce the last name. I don't want to chop it up. But so in my personal life, what I've created and what I've helped create in Jersey City, which is where I live, is an interfaith service corps. So part of what I feel Hinduism is so good at is that we're tolerant of all religions. And so I helped create a service corps that goes into churches and mosques and synagogues, or community centers that are located in the pockets of poverty in Jersey City, and do soup kitchens. That's how, and encouraging people from different faiths and religions and young professionals who may not necessarily be religious, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but to come out to the community and do soup kitchen, whether it's in a masjid or whether it's in a Jewish community center, and kind of encourage people to reach out to other religions and other faiths.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, the Jewish people have been doing that forever.
Forever, exactly.
I mean, 90% of Indian classical music is based on devotion and Hindu gods and everything, so it's part of what we do every day. And we do have a pretty large non-Indian audience across the world, and many of them are very keen on learning more about Hinduism, because I think the advantage for us, and one of the things I was really keen on, is to position this. I mean, just to give you an example, like when you go to Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts and you see a concert, it is spectacular, right? It's like something you want to be there, you want to be seen and heard. But without being rude to anyone, I would say like a big chunk of Indian classical concerts happen in venues with not very great, acoustic systems, or, like audiences not really paying attention half the time, the acoustics are not that great and all of that. So I think because when people come and see our videos, they're like so well produced, it kind of piques their interest, and then they want to learn more about it. And then we try and break it down in some ways, because, I mean, compared to most other religions, what makes Hinduism, as Swami Vivekananda said, it's the complexity of the religion where you can carve your own path. There's so many gods. There's an elephant god. There is, the trinity of gods. So I don't think we can really explain Hinduism in a nutshell to everyone, except for just telling the basic tenets of how flexible, liberal, and tolerant it is. And maybe as talking about it as a way of life, and just talking about like the transferable components of that without going into the stories of mythology. I think that is too complex an entry point, but just talking about like some of the core values and like the karma philosophy, for example, which I think is universally applicable to everyone. So that's what we try and do. So we'll take something which is like a Ganesh Vandana, and if like a non-Hindu wants to kind of understand that, we'll say, okay, that's one of the gods from the Hindu pantheon. But essentially what they're trying to say through that is that we should value music for XYZ reason, we should value education for XYZ reason, whatever the translation of that is. So we do that to a certain extent. In my own life, I think it's just literally a way of life for me. And I think the culture is so rich, and there's so many components and nuggets of wisdom that we just kind of come across. And part of the thing is, you know, I don't think you can ever learn all about Hinduism in one lifetime. So it's just this beautiful journey where suddenly you kind of go and meet like this wise old grandparent that you probably did not meet for a long time, and they throw some nugget of wisdom at you. And it's just nice to keep discovering that every day, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I mean, I think for me, it's been more personal, I would say. I don't really get involved so much with my work. Obviously working with teenagers and the like, I tend to shy away from conversations about religion, just in general, as an ongoing practice. But for me personally, I think that the culture, you know, absolutely, like the music, the art, the writings, all of it is something that I would consume personally and kind of incorporate in myself. I think that in the future, you know, maybe some form of volunteer work within the Hindu community. I mean, I think also that's one of the good criticisms that we have to address, which is there is no easy entryway, right? There's no like, oh, just pick up this phone, you know, or go on this website and, you know, boom, you're in. You know, it's kind of like you have to work your way in, you have to show up, and you have to do this. Whereas for everything else, I mean, like we can get on our phone now and call an Uber, right? You can call a helicopter if you want. It's crazy, right? So for me, no, you know, like perhaps maybe I was a little too embroiled in my kind of professional life. So Hinduism has kind of stayed more of a personal thing for me and a more of a private thing. But I'm always happy to share my thoughts if somebody's genuinely curious and asks questions. I try to present as, you know, a fair view as possible, and more often than not direct them to appropriate resources, because I think the most important thing is how diverse Hinduism is. I'm not here to tell anybody this is how you do it, this is the right answer. It's why don't you take a look at this, read this, or maybe go attend a panel or a speech or a lecture by this person and see where that takes you. And I'm curious to know what you come up with, and that's kind of where it is for me. So.
Thank you. You know, I was thinking of the analogy of the fish bowl. The fish is in water, but he does not realize it's in water. And that's all of us, I think. I mean, we live the Hindu life. And being here, for me, has been such a... I'm thinking, oh, what are the aspects of my life that are Hindu, rather than, I mean, I celebrate all the festivals and I pray once in a while, go to the temple. But I mean, you know, I'm just like, this has really made me think about, you know, sort of separating that, because otherwise I just feel I'm like that fish in the water of Hinduism, you know. So we have some questions from the audience. Oh God, quite a bit. I hope we can get through this. Okay. Okay, this is pretty specific to Sriram. Many students come to us from India with huge loans and studying at MIT and then finding an organization. How did you manage the finances?
I actually did my MBA, so I kind of came in with an expectation of like $170,000 loan, but I think at the end of the first year I came in the top 5 of my class, so I got the Siebel Scholarship, which funded part of that. And then I became an MIT Tata Fellow. I actually spoke yesterday in Boston at the MIT Tata Center graduation, and I was the only MBA fellow they selected from the class, and they actually funded, not only funded my MBA, but also paid me a stipend. So I'm unfortunately like an extremely non-standard example of how to fund it, but one of the ways people do it, actually a bunch of ways, and I'm happy to talk afterwards just so I'm not taking other people's time on this, is there's definitely scholarships available. You can be a TA or an RA, and teaching assistantships will pay for like a good chunk of that. Cooking at home and following the Hindu way of life, healthy eating, will save you not only a lot of like money, but also like a lot of like stress. I did that every day. In general, I think when you go to a top tier university, their educational loans are very easy to get, and the rates are very low, and the payback periods are very long. So I personally, if it's a life-changing experience, you should just do it, and the money will come.
Yeah. Some of these questions are, I think we already covered, so I'm not going to ask those questions. So for instance, experienced criticism. We already talked about how they dealt with their parents and, sort of decided to go into these fields. But there is an interesting question here, and that is, this is for you. And how does Hinduism connect to philanthropy and seva? And why is it important that the Hindu community needs to be involved in philanthropic causes?
Oh my God. Okay, so this is exactly what I thought I was going to talk about, so thank you for that question. So seva, for me, in my jobs, in growing up, seva, selfless, Anubhava, which means, I believe, selfless service, I feel that as Hindus, to look at it in the perspective of karma, and do good, and in that perspective, I feel that my job, if I'm able to help one person, in whichever path, or whether it's a food bank that I'm, trying to fund and give money to, or it's a job training program that helps a person out of the criminal justice system get a job, and not just a job, but a career. At the end of the day, I know it sounds very selfish to say this, because I sometimes, within my own self, I battle whether there is anything that is purely selfless. And so I've had these conversations with my father, because it's not selfless if I feel good at the end of the day that I helped do this, right? It's a cycle that keeps going on, and I'm like, at what point am I purely doing it for that person's happiness and not because it makes me feel good? And I think there are many Hindu, and my dad tells me, my mom tells me, my parents tell me, read the Veda, read, these Hindu scriptures that will somehow show you the path. And I know this is going to sound very inarticulate, but I'm still trying to figure out what the connection between philanthropy and my own true seva means for me. I know what it means for my job, I know what it means at the end of the day, because I feel good because I gave money to this organization, I'm helping them, but what is, at the end, not at the end of the day, but for my lifetime, what am I really trying to aspire to? Because I want to get to that point where I'm not doing philanthropy because it makes me feel good, or because I'm doing good, or my parents are able to say, yeah, my daughter, does good, but what does it mean for me ultimately? And I'm still trying to figure that out. So I'm not sure if I actually answered the question articulate as I wanted it to come out.
I mean, it does seem that each one has to find their path as to why they want to do seva, and why, is Hinduism important? Is philanthropy important for Hinduism? Philanthropy is important for everybody, for everyone. If you have money, I don't know if it's, I know, for instance, Muslims have it built into their religion as zakat, and I don't know if we have that built into the religion.
And Judaism has it built into their
religion too.
Yeah, exactly.
I know we have annadana, which is the feeding of the poor, which happens after someone's died or something, right? Like funerals. But I don't know if we have that built into our religion, but
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think, so I'm just going to give each of you one of these questions. And one is, how would you advise high schoolers to go about picking? This is a very large question, but could you say two most important points that high schoolers need to remember as they start looking at colleges, picking a college? I think we could restrict it to just two.
Yeah, that's like you said, it's a very broad question.
Yeah.
I would say first off, we live in a very unique place in New York City, right? So living in New York City, we have a very different set of things that I would advise kids to look for than if you were living, let's say, in the middle of the heartland or in Texas or something like that. I would say the two things that are the most important, right, would be the size of the school, realistically, how big, it's going to sound amazing to go to a school like a UMich, right? It's got 60,000, 70,000 people. That might be awesome at first. You might get swallowed up by it too. It really depends. And the second thing will also be the program. It's not just about the school you go to. The reality is, and as we all have experience in college, we tend to kind of see a certain subset of the school more face-to-face, right? So in whatever area of study that you plan on pursuing, I would say make sure that's up to par. I'd rather sacrifice the name of the university for for one that's not as well recognized, that has a better program or a better fit for the kid, than vice versa. Just because you go to a name brand school doesn't necessarily mean you'll have an amazing experience. And just because you go to a school that not everybody recognizes doesn't mean you'll have a less than par experience as well. So that would be my 2 pieces of advice I could give in general.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? No? So it was really wonderful to hear from you, very inspiring, all of you. I mean, the fact that you all followed your heart is the most inspiring thing of all. I mean, you know, that to me is follow your heart. I mean, you get there, you know, whether the money will come, everything else will come, but, you know, follow your heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all so much. Please, a round of applause for Mira Nair, Sriram Imani, Bharati Sethumadhavan, and Nishant Sayor. And we would, of course, like to thank them on behalf of the Hindu Temple Society of North America for sharing their, you know, wonderful point of views.
Namaste everyone, my name is Abhirami and I am proud to be standing here today on behalf of my Akshayam team, a group of young Hindus who have come together to put together Anubhava. I want to give them one round of applause. They've come here together with a shared interest of seeing Hinduism and this Sri Mahavallabaganpati Devasthanam grow and reach greater and greater heights. When I was growing up with my fellow committee members, I unmistakably knew that we were from different backgrounds, with a varied exposure to Hinduism and its practices. We had different mother tongues. We had different understandings due to different upbringings. We had different hobbies and different areas in which we excelled. But the common thread was that we were all passionately tied to our faith, longed to come to the temple whenever possible, and determined to make our mark on this ongoing legacy. We all agreed that if we didn't stick together and commit to making a difference, our beautiful temples would slowly transform into exhibits, tourist attractions, or most sadly, museums. That one similarity has proven to be more than enough for us to join hands and go out into the world as proud Hindu ambassadors. We pledged our commitment to serve the Lord by serving our community and bring our different areas of expertise together to achieve that success. The first step was the creation of an official platform, Akshayam, back in 2015, that would allow like-minded individuals to come together, learn more about our faith, discuss relevant issues, question the grayer areas, and carry on the baton of this great institution. Akshayam, meaning inexhaustible in Sanskrit, aptly captures the essence of our mission and attitude. The goal of Akshayam is to bring together young professionals in the Hindu community to foster discussion about important social and religious topics, and to engage in social activism through workshops and events, as well as through community service and engagement with our temple. We organized Anubhava 2016 with great success last year, and pioneered the creation of a Mahaganapati Natya Gana Sabha back in January, to bring together young musical talent across the tri-state area. Now we are standing here at Anubhava 2017, looking forward to Anubhava 2018. At this time, I want to invite my fellow Akshaya members to say a few words about their involvement in the temple and the projects that they're currently involved in. We all know Ravli. So I'm just asking all Akshaya members to stand, and I'll be passing around the mic, and they'll be basically in 1 or 2 lines saying what projects they're currently involved in to show you the breadth of our involvement.
Namaste everyone, my name is Divya Manka. I've been involved in Akshayam the past 2 years and in the temple almost my entire life. I went just about a couple blocks away from here. So mainly Akshayan members are involved in activities like Chaturthi, Brahmotsavam. We do soup kitchens. I know Divya is also heavily involved in soup kitchen. So yeah, I mean, if anyone's interested, young professionals who are mainly interested to join Akshayan, heavily involved, every weekend we do volunteering events. Feel free to contact Ravli or Abhirami or at the front desk in the Hindu temple as well.
Thank you, Divya. We have a few representatives from Colombia here today.
I'm Shubhabrata Das. I'm a PhD student at Columbia University, and I'm also the president of Hindu Yuva student chapter at Columbia, and we organize a lot of voluntary activities, a lot of professional.
So let's jumpstart this discussion with a brief introduction with your professional roles and the way you remained involved in Hinduism and its practices while still maintaining a professional career.
Namaste everyone. So I work at a financial services company in New Jersey. I'm a lawyer in the tax department there. And so while that doesn't directly relate to Hinduism, I found many ways to bring Hinduism into the workplace and also practice it on my personal time and stay engaged with the community in different ways. So for example, I think in our personal lives, we're all, in one way or the other, ambassadors of our community and our faith. So I make it a practice to wear my bindi to work. And that is often a way of expressing my Hindu identity and also starting conversations with others so they can learn about our tradition and our religion. And also through mentoring many people in the workplace, especially young Asians and young women. I try to bring about my learnings from karma and share that with them. And also in my free time, I do different things to stay involved with the community.
Namaskar everyone. It is a privilege to be here speaking in front of such a esteemed audience. I was born and raised in Indore, a small city in Madhya Pradesh, in a big family of 6 uncles and aunts and a lot of cousins. And religion was naturally imbibed in the environment, and it came naturally to me. The first exposure to any scripture that I would say to me was as a little kid when I used to read Ramcharitmanas with my grandmother. And we used to read a couple pages every night before going to bed, and the tradition continued till I got married and left my home. Religion has been sacrosanct to me in a way that all the household chores, taking care of family things, was like a seva to us, for all family members, including my parents, including me and my brother, and all other family. And this idea of seva was somehow close to my heart in a broader sense, and when it came to career choices, being a physician came naturally to me. My parents encouraged me to work hard towards my goal, but the whole idea of being individually involved in somebody's life and trying to help them was very close to my heart, and that's how it slowly evolved into being a physician. Working as a physician in India and over here has been a great experience, and I feel that Hinduism has been always complementary to my practice of medicine. It always gives me a chance to analyze things objectively, keeping myself away or kind of separated from the goal, from the outcome. You know, our religion teaches us to work hard towards your karma, but at the same time stay away from the outcome, to keep yourself away from it. It's something that God is, what He has in mind. And that keeps me more focused on what I can do rather than focusing on what can happen. And it's in best interest for everybody, for me and for my patients, and thus Hinduism is an integral part of what I do and how I do. And at the end of the day, the whole doing something that could have an impact on life on a day-to-day basis. And that's how Hinduism has been part of me and my career and my life.
Hi everyone. So, really good question. So I would say that storytelling has been around for so many years, right? But what's really changed is the different kinds of stories that you tell to different audiences. And so what our production company tries to do is bring that South Asian identity that everyone was talking about today earlier. How do you frame it in terms of media today? So we think about, Priyanka Chopra, we think about different characters that we see on TV, and we wonder, are there going to be more scripts written about the South Asian identity, right? Are there going to be more characters that come to life? So I attended a conference in 2013, and that's where this conversation started, where everyone asked, okay, you see all these different characters just starting to emerge on TV, but how do we keep them there? And the trick to that is understanding that we need people from our generation, from our culture, to start telling those stories more frequently and more predominantly within the media. So what I mean by that is, maybe our parents had, experiences where they were being picked on for religion and their faith and their beliefs, but for us, yes, we've had some of those hardships, but mainly we are the characters of like the white guy's best friend, right? We're no longer the 7-Eleven guy in the stories. We're part of that whole center. And so if people start to write more and more about these stories, then I think that this will continue. Now, what we try to do as a production company is say that we understand that the parents had this struggle, but we want to tell the stories about the community and the ecosystem that we're building today, right? We don't have to focus on all the negatives that we had to overcome and the hardships. Now we should start telling about what we built and how successful we're going to be in the future, right? You take it as Microsoft CEO, Google CEO, they're South Asians or Indians. We want to be able to tell stories like that, that involve the community that we live around and how we can further that. In terms of professional life and religion, I'd say that the art of storytelling is what helps make religion and culture really strong. So finding ways to channel that back into our films, channel that back into our scripts, and tell those stories to wider demographics, but still keep the same focus and themes, that's what we try to do.
Great, thank you. So a common thread that I've been hearing amongst all three of you is Hindu pride, that you have a lot of Hindu pride in you yourselves. And that's something a lot would argue that a lot of youngsters that are brought up here lack. So why do you think Hindus now, young Hindus that are born and brought up in America, lack that Hindu pride? And what can we do to reinstill that, or bringing it back into our families or back into schools? I mean, they're growing up in communities with the heavy influence of the Abrahamic faiths. So what commitment or what duty do we have, and what can we do to reinstill that Hindu pride among our Hindu youth?
So I think it starts with creating the Hindu identity. So I think a lot of our youth today don't necessarily think of themselves as Hindu. They may think of themselves as Indian American, as minorities, as being brown, but they don't think of the religious aspect of their identity. And what they do in youth, or even if they go to like Bal Vihar, or they go to the temple, they may do that as children, maybe even in high school, and by the time they go to college, a lot of that just goes away and evaporates from their life. So I think there has to be a conscious effort on the behalf of parents to begin with, to make the practice of Hinduism a part of daily life, and not just a monthly visit to the temple where you have a big lunch, you have darshan, and then you go back and it's not there. So, relating to storytelling, which I think is so important, we have such wonderful stories in our Puranas, in our Itihas, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, that you can understand in different ways at all ages, starting from a very young age. So my nephews, for example, are about, they just turned 5. And I've gotten them the box set of the Amar Chitra Katha stories. And my brother and sister-in-law were worried, is it going to be too much for them to buy, will they understand? But they really wanted to read it, so they started going through it. And then one of my nephews, every day will talk about Rama, and he'll have questions about him, he'll want to talk about him, so he'll want to be like Rama. So I think we underestimate the power of stories, of our wonderful stories, to really attract and captivate a young audience. And then I think that has to translate to having a practice of sadhana at home. So when I was very young, my mother would have me, after I take my bath, to recite a mantra for Ma Saraswati. And it was just a very small shloka, but that little practice instilled in me the habit that after bathing in the morning, there's some religious or spiritual practice that should be done. And I think having that practice as a daily habit, it's when you set that foundation when you're young, then you have that consciousness and identity, and later on in life that really sets you up for your well-being and mental peace, like you were saying, to cope with life. And then I think a lot of it is about education, being proactive. So there are a lot of negative things in our textbooks in schools, and I think a lot of times in our community we're taught to revere schools, to revere our teachers, so we kind of take it at face value what our professors, what our teachers tell us, and we're not very involved in like the PTA or the school boards, or seeing what's actually being taught to our children, what's being shown on CNN, what's in the media, what are our kids seeing, and what are their peers or non-Hindu friends seeing, and how does that come back to them. So really becoming active in the community, finding out the misrepresentations and consciously attacking them. I think what we found is when parents get involved at the community level, at the school board level, then there is opportunity to change textbooks, to introduce things into the curriculum. That's harder to do on top, so we really need that grassroots involvement and activism at the local level.
I completely agree with you, Aditi. The work has to start from home, at the very basic and grassroots level. And Hinduism is just not stories or ideas. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. And the children imbibe what they see. The children learn what they see. And if we as parents keep demonstrating the right thing to them, eventually it gets to them. So it's just the right kind of environment. And exposing them to the right literature. It could be just stories, it could be the ideas early in their life, and keep them exposing at different levels as they grow older. Will build upon what they have learned as young children. And Amar Chitrakalpa is a great thing, Aditi. You said both my boys grew up reading them since they were young, since they learned how to read. And they know more about mythological stories than I ever knew till I was grown up. So that's a great beginning, and it builds upon the basic foundation that and all stories end into some kind of logic, some kind of message that they can carry further in their lives. So yes, it has to start from us as parents, as community members, and it has to spread out from there to a more broader and wider level.
So I would say that I agree with both you guys completely, and I agree with the local grassroots effort. But I think that from an individual level, I'll give you an example. You've seen it in the movie, if you guys have watched it, American Born Confused Daisy, ABCD. So there's a scene where he wipes, he has something on his forehead and he wipes it off because he's embarrassed or ashamed. I think that we started those conversations before and we were embarrassed and we used to try to hide it because we weren't used to understanding what that could cause us, and we didn't want to go down that route. But then sooner or later we figure out that that's a part of our identity and we have to realign with it, right? So that we go through a space where we kind of drop off and then we find it again. And then from then it's just a clear highway straight, right? But finding that moment is what is really crucial. And what I've seen, like for example, I have two older sisters. For one of them, she lived in Paris, and my mom would call her and be like, so did you do Aarti today, right? And my sister would be like, no, I didn't have time, right? So then my mom was like, okay, why don't you make this effort, go on YouTube, and she sent her the link, right, on this WhatsApp conversation. So she sends her the link, and then my sister started doing it every day. So it's finding ways. I don't think we're confused, I think we're selective. So we have to choose different frameworks, different ideas that we like, and pick them and put it into our bucket, right, of what we want to practice. Some way or the other you figure out, okay, this is working, this is not, this is what I believe in, but you try to question it. And when we question it further and further, it's because of organizations like this and events like this that we're able to kind of collaborate and understand what it means. If we go deeper beyond, like for example, you'll see all these different ideas and stories in the Mahabharata, right? But how do you localize that? How do you centralize those lessons and put them in today's world? How do you put them into today's demographic? Us. And that's what the challenge is. And I think that coming back to your point about the groups, finding ways to relate to the material is the hardest part. But it can't be through, like it has to be facilitated through, like a Panditji or a Swami as well as have that active collaboration. If it's just one side, it's not gonna be like a good conversation. There needs to be both sides, and I think the parents also have to get involved, not in terms of you have to do this, you have to do that, but to understand and respect that, listen, there's so many different things that you could be pursuing at this time, but I understand that you only want to, for example, not eat meat on Tuesday. Okay, fine. Or you want to only say Arti once a week. At least we're making an effort. And I think as we make more and more of an effort, our kids, hopefully they'll grow up, they'll see this, and then they will also have to choose and be selected as well. So it's gonna be a cycle.
Great, those are some great ideas. So I think I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about the lack of Hindu schools per se, in a more like elementary Hindu school. Like we have a Catholic school, we have a school for the Jewish children. Why do you think we don't have any Hindu schools for children? And we know, I mean, we are the model minority, we have all the resources. Why does it take us forever to rally together to fight for these issues, to fight for these causes?
So I think what's interesting, in the UK actually, the first Hindu school came and it was founded by ISKCON. And I think you find generally with movements like this, whether it's Hindu schools or other things, often ISKCON I find is at the forefront of it. And the reason I think that's the case is because ISKCON, as compared to a lot of mainstream Hindus, has a lot of nishta, and it has a lot of a depth of conviction and a real identity in whether it's at their own organization or in what their beliefs are, their principles, and their traditions. So they take it very seriously. And I find that Muslims have this, a lot of Jews have this, Catholics have this, but Hindus don't. I think what we often think of it as cultural, what is really religious, and I think we often don't give it the degree of importance it should have in our lives as individuals, families, or society. So I think a lot of parents may not think it's very important for their children to have read the Bhagavad Gita or to have memorized it, or to do like Sandha Vandanam or morning prayers or different things. It's just, we treat it almost as optional or just like kind of nice to have rather than something it's important and it's a must-have. And up until the time we actually have that degree of conviction and are firm in our own belief and identity, I don't think you'll see these things coming out until we have that within ourselves.
So, what I feel is there is some degree of lack of conviction of this is something worth celebrating in Hinduism, that we are all diverse, we are all different, we don't necessarily believe or pray in the same manner, and yet we are all Hindus. So there is a lack of coordination or a concentrated effort to do something like that. And I agree with Aditi also that we a lot of times think religion is optional thing. You do what you can do, and if you don't do it, it's okay too. And so to have a school or to have an organized educational institution for Hinduism, it has been a challenge so far. But I think we are getting closer to that. Till now, I could not find anything for my children to go in summer to spend time in a Hindu environment. But I found some places who do that. There are Hindus who do camps for children now. So we are moving in the right direction. It's just that we have to have more conviction towards it. Now we have Diwali is an official holiday in New York City. In Long Island, most of the schools have Diwali as official holiday. So we are trying to move it towards the right direction. We are getting more organized. We are more publicly seen as a group that needs recognition. And if we continue to move in the same direction, I think eventually we'll have something that would be more concrete to show as a school where we would be proudly sending our children to.
I agree with both your points, but I also want to challenge it in that aspect that once you do set up the schools, right, and you have these institutions, how do you increase involvement? How do you make sure people keep coming to these programs, right? Because there may be a party that says, okay, we're going to set these up, and then we're going to see what the turnout is, and you can do pilots, and you can test it out. But how do you solve that problem where you're going to have constant engagement? How do you match up in this lifestyle that we're living, right? all these people that are trying to figure out their own identities, maybe they want to go on Google and they want to figure out what exactly they should know. What's the bare minimum I should know about Hinduism in order to operate in today's world? I don't know. I'd like to find that out, right? And no one's going to tell me that. It's going to be
not be true 10 years down the line, and what I believe today may not be true down the line. And you have to be flexible enough to adapt to the change. The quality of education that you want your children, besides religion, should be at par with, or maybe better than many other places. And the parents will bring their children over there. And I know as a fact that there are Muslim schools which are performing so much above the state level that parents want to, it's a prestige for the parents to send their children over there. So you have to have an organization of that structure that people feel proud to bring your children. We send a lot of Hindus send their children to Catholic schools because they provide the kind of education that they feel that their children deserve. So if we are able to provide the kind of education in a certain Hindu environment, people will not like that, and it will be a success as long as the commitment is there from the community. So it is a changing thing, and we have and Hindus are known for that. They are very ready to change. They are very ready to adapt. So if we go for it, it will be successful.
Great points. So Rome, you brought up the idea of balance, and in terms of Aditi and your career, I know it's a little bit of a trajectory, but you're in the corporate field. There's a lot of networking events where you discuss things over cocktails, or there are hors d'oeuvres that are non-vegetarian, and you have a very traditional lifestyle, and you're very proud to be Hindu and all those things. So how do you balance corporate life and your Hindu traditional lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually, 2 years in a row, I was part of this Women's Leadership Roundtable event, and they both took place in Napa Valley, California. In Napa Valley, for those of you who don't know, that's like the wine country in California. And basically what the program was is you go to like winery after winery, you have like wine tastings, and then you're networking and you have some discussion in between. And this was like the first time I was meeting these women, as I was like new to the group, and I was very worried because I don't drink. I'm vegetarian, and I was wondering how am I going to get along in this environment. Well, I was upfront with the people, obviously, that I don't drink, but I think the important thing is you want to be able to connect to people and be engaged and be proactive. So I would go along with them, and they'd usually serve me like apple juice or something. But sometimes I would, I just ask them how the wine was, or something like smell the wine, or I'd still make myself part of the conversation. And then you'll be surprised. I think if you're not judgmental of other people won't be judgmental of you. And there are always ways of connecting with different people. It doesn't have to be that you have to get drunk together, or things like that. So I was like the designated driver in that group. And then people would tell me of stories of times when like they hadn't been drinking or things like that. But I still found a way to bond. And I think more importantly, not only was it not an obstacle, I think it helped, because I think people respect when you have like a lifestyle, or if you have conviction in something and you're honoring that, then people respect that about you. So that worked out well. And then we do have like a lot of networking receptions and things like that. And it's perfectly okay to walk around with a Sprite, and people may not know if it's vodka or Sprite, and you don't have to tell anyone. And I think just having, the important thing about it is you're meeting with people, you're connecting with them. And the other thing is when you're true to yourself and you're authentic and you don't have pretensions, and you're not trying to pass yourself off as someone that you're not, people I think inherently trust you more and respect you. And then I would say like the other part of it is like this has actually kind of been an asset for me, because like in our company we had this diversity town hall about religious pluralism or religious diversity, and I was actually asked to speak at that, and I was the only employee who was asked to speak at that. So sometimes I think we worry about standing out or being different, but in my being different or standing out in these ways, that actually helped me be recognized for this thing and gave me opportunities I otherwise may not have found. So I think the most important thing is just be true to yourself. And the other example I would give is, sometimes for Ekadashi, if I'm fasting, I'll tell people I'm fasting. And maybe they bring in food for lunch or things like that. But there hasn't been anything that's been important to me that I haven't done because of my corporate lifestyle, including going on pilgrimage. Often I'll go for 3 weeks in the Himalayas and I won't be accessible on my phone or email. And people respect that. And that's really the great thing about this country, and including in corporate America, that people will respect your religious principles, your beliefs, and your traditions, and they'll find ways of making it work. It's just that we ourselves don't ask for things. Like when Shivratri comes on a weeknight, we don't tell work that it's a religious holiday, we're not going to come in the morning because we have to stay up all night. We'll just make the compromise on our own because we're too afraid to ask. And I think we have to ask, and we have to say this is important to us, and then this is a great country because it will accommodate you and respect you for it.
Great, those are great points. And Dr. Agarwal, balance in your life is key as well. I mean, you work in critical care. When people hear the words critical care, you get goosebumps all over your body. So how do you manage to stay grounded? And how do you manage to de-stress when you get home and deal with these life and death situations in your career?
Very good question, Abhirami. These are all good questions. They are very challenging circumstances. Somehow I find my core beliefs and my Hindu philosophy has always kept me leveled and centered. I face situations that are critical, that are life-changing for people, that could be a matter of life and death. And sometimes you have to break bad news to people and their family members. And then it's hard to sometimes relate that why this thing happened to me, why me, and what now? And those are difficult questions. And the only right answer in these circumstances is to be compassionate to people, because that's what they need. They need somebody that somebody would listen to them, somebody hears them and understands them. You have to respect their pain, their emotion, their grief, and give them room to express themselves. And this is the compassion that Hinduism teaches us, to respect other people, to respect their feelings. And at the end of the day, I know in my own mind and heart that destiny is what it is. It's going to happen. God has what He has designed for us in a big scheme of universe. And this small episode is just a drop in the big ocean. And we have to just focus on our karma, what we can do, how we can do it the best, and be somehow separate myself from the outcome. Because outcome could be good or bad. And what we think is bad may not necessarily be bad. Maybe what is the right thing. So these are all subjective assessments of good and bad. But Hinduism somehow makes me step back and look things in a bigger perspective. Let's take an example. If there's a big white sheet of paper and there's a dot on there, and if you look at it closely, you will see a dot. But when you look at it from a distance, you see a whole big white paper and just a dot on it. So Hinduism gives me that perspective sometimes, to step back and look at it with a different angle. Because most of the times the solutions will come from within in difficult circumstances. You will figure out how to communicate. You will figure out how to tell them. You will figure out what is the best next step. And you will be able to hold the hands to people, walk with them, and help them get stuff done. So somehow Hinduism has been my leveling ground, my center, something that I come home and forget about what I did throughout the day and think that it was a day's job, it was what I did, what my karma was, and whatever is going to happen is going to be, God's business. So this is how I somehow sometimes approach difficult situations.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Agarwal. And Rome, something that really puzzles me is that in India, the film industry is so big. I mean, there's so many films that are produced every year. But when you come to America, there's a lack of representation of Indian Americans in media or in a positive light. Why do you think that exists, and what can we do to sort of rectify this issue?
I think, first off, the parents in the room, no, I'm not trying to offend anyone, but we need to send our kids to acting classes, dancing classes, singing classes, make them more artistic and more creative, because that's only gonna drive, this passion. That's the first step, because if they start to generate that ability early on or tap into it, then they'll at least know how to harness it for the future, right? So they'll understand, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. These are the kind of career paths that I have to make in order to get to where I want to be. I think that's the thing. The second point is that if you are working together with so many different people, it's kind of hard sometimes to represent South Asians directly in a story. Right, so there's so many different facets to a story, right? So how do you make culture, identity, and everything so prevalent? It's either through the discussions, it's either through the conversations, it's through the way the character looks or appears. So all these things have to be identified and studied, right? So if you can't really, like, it sounds very simple to say, I just want to make this person South Asian, have a South Asian identity, but what does that exactly mean? It's so difficult, and it's such a gray area because we've changed so much, right? Before it could have been that I don't listen to, I listen to spiritual temple music and I don't listen to rap music, right? But now I listen to rap music and stuff like that. So how do you make those differentiations? Because there's so much gray area, it's harder to write about. And that's why you don't see it as often. If we're able to clearly define it in certain ways, I think that will make it easier to portray on screen.
That's great, and I think with more Indian directors, film directors that emerge in America, a lot more of the stereotypes can sort of be dispelled in media, and that's like a great form of communication, especially for the youngsters now. And I know the major buzz is CNN's Reza Aslan's Believer, which was a pretty bad documentary portraying Hinduism, and I guess do you guys think, I mean, Rome touched upon this, like more Hindu directors can represent our faith in a more real sense, then we can avoid a lot of these issues. But how do we address when documentaries like this do come? Do we petition for things like this, petition against them, do rallies? What is the best way to address this situation?
So I think you have to do both. So when something like that comes out, you do have to take firm actions against it. Now, it's interesting that Reza Aslan has actually been dropped from CNN as of a few days ago because he said something derogatory about President Trump. And like within a day or two of that, he got dropped. Whereas on the other hand, when the show on Hinduism, which was the first episode in that series, came out, it was disgustingly bigoted. It was hate-mongering, and it could very easily give rise to hate crimes against Hindus in this country. And there were lots of efforts, like Hindu Students Council had done a Facebook Live with Rajiv Malhotra going through the documentary almost like moment by moment to show the misrepresentations and how it was exoticizing and making Hinduism seem like really weird and awful. And there were a lot of meetings, I think, with people in Congress, or a lot of efforts by the community, but nothing really came of it. So one thing I think, and touching on what Rashma Ji was talking about this morning, is really developing power. And I think sometimes we think like if you write an article, if you write a petition, it can be like beautifully crafted, it can be like accurate, but it won't be enough to get us the results that we need, because you need political power in the community, in the country, and now you're starting to see some like Hindu representatives in Congress, and I think like Tulsi Gabbard is the best example, because it's not about whether you have someone of Indian ethnicity or nominally Hindu, but someone who will stand up for us, and she has already done that time and time again, even though she's still relatively new to Congress. But you can't just rely on others doing that work for us. So like we were talking about, as Rashman was saying, like a lot of temples don't invite officials to come in and address them. And the other thing is, even when we do have that, we don't have an agenda. Like we don't have an agenda. Like these are our priorities for the community. This is what we need to advocate for on behalf of Hindu Americans. And so without that, we're kind of at a disadvantage. So I think it's a few things. One is we have to continue to react when these things come. But these things are just like symptoms, and you can't cure the disease by just focusing on the symptoms. So you have to go, two things. One is developing that advocacy, that political power, and that public kind of engagement. And then the other part of it is involving us on the content production side. So don't rely on others to tell our story accurately or fairly. And going to what Rome is saying, I think it is important to send our kids to acting classes and be open to like non-conventional in the Indian context careers. I had heard something interesting the other day that in India there's this Islamic university that actually it brings in students and trains them as cameramen, and then they go and work in like the Indian media and things like that. And when you're part of the production, whether it's a cameraman, a director, an anchor, whatever, you will have influence over the content that gets produced. But if you just stay away from that and you're not involved at all in telling the story and getting it out there, it's really hard to be represented well. So we have to be much more strategic about how we engage in these different ways and be proactive and not just reactive.
Do you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, I'd say you have to react, definitely, and you have to firstly make it apparent that this is a misrepresentation. But the second thing is, don't just stop there, make better content, as you just said, right? Fight it off with content that's actually true, which is actually relevant, and find influencers in the community to advocate that. If it never gets heard, we never talk, we always hear about the bad things that we've been represented by, but when do we ever really boast about the good things that have been said about us, right? And where are the channels to make this more apparent and more, transparent within the communities? That's missing. That's what, if something gets created, it needs to be pushed out, and there has to be defined channels of who's going to be the one to get this message out. And I think if you have the stronger people supporting it and backing it up, then these misrepresentation stories will be drowned out eventually, because everyone will focus on the good, and obviously there's going to be some bad things that are said, 100%, but you can't stop it, right? So the only way to beat it is to create more content.
While we're getting questions from the audience together, I guess the final question for me is that we brought up a lot of challenges that we face. What newer challenges do you project that we will face in the next 10, 15 years? And what can we do now to sort of prevent that from happening if we can, or address it properly when it does happen? What challenges basically do you project that we will face in the next 10 years as it relates to our faith, our culture, and the way our children are being brought up in this community?
So I think I think the challenge will be now that we have like second generation people, and then they start having kids, and how do we pass on Hinduism to them? So oftentimes my brother will ask me, I want to tell something to my sons, but I don't know enough about it to say something about Durga Puja or Navratri, for example. So I think. We already see the problems we have as as children of immigrants in the second generation here, and I think that will only just get more compounded in future generations. I think also there is this general tendency kind of going away from religion, from religious identity, and kind of more amorphous New Age spirituality. Why do we need religion? Why can't we just take the good things that we want? And kind of treating religion as a buffet. We'll take a little bit here, a little bit there. But I don't like this. I'm just going to keep that away. And that's kind of my individual right. And I think you end up with a lot of dilution that happens there. And I think that also relates to a problem. I think we're going to have more and more about just digestion and even further dilution, because things like yoga and meditation, in an effort to make them more marketable and palatable to mainstream American society, is being divorced from its Indian and Hindu origins. And so, on the one hand, we're going to have people who are, are Hindus who are less engaged and less educated about Hinduism, and on the other side, the supply of the content is going to be further and further diluted and harder to access in an accurate way. And I think we're also seeing how Hinduism gets taught and presented, starting from elementary school to universities, and then in the media and popular culture. It's overwhelmingly negative, and much more so than other religions are. And without really being able to combat that, it just makes the problems much harder to solve.
I think the same too, Aditi. We keep religion as a personal thing. Most of us, we keep it to ourselves, to our families, and it's going to get shriveled down as it goes down from one generation to the next. And I see a serious crisis happening when the next generation is going to have their children, how much is going to be passed on to them. I already see that we are not able to pass on a lot of languages to them, so reading the scriptures, learning the scripture is already almost negligible. What we see is television, movies, learning from other people, reading stories from other people. So reading original scriptures, original literature is almost gone, and it's going to be vanished by the next generation comes. So I see a real crisis, and I really don't know what the best solution is, but I think we have to keep reinforcing to the next generation.
I just want to add one thing. But when I was growing up, we went to India every year in the summer and would spend like a few months there. And I think increasingly that you know, for future generations, they may not have those trips back to India. And that was really foundational for me, spending that time with my grandparents or going to different temples there. And there's a different way that you just imbibe our culture and in Hinduism through those trips and those contexts. And I worry about that as well.
Going off of that, I would always remember that that's really important for the next generation and for us to keep doing. But like my Hindi here is broken, but as soon as I get into India and I'm talking to people, it's perfect. Well, not perfect, but it's you know, it's much better, and I can at least talk myself out of a situation. So I think that's really important to understand that language and keep that consistent. As far as the scriptures and the text and everything, passing that down is going to be very difficult. So you know, for example, I've read English interpretations of the Bhagavad Gita. I've tried to find material that I can relate to and see if I can draw conclusions from it. I think that everyone really touched upon all the points that I had to say about like the challenges, but finding a way to put together, like for example, this event, you coordinated it through, I'm guessing, Google Hangouts or like conference calls to figure out how to get everyone together and plan this. Stuff like that needs to be more prominent, right? Like, we're not going to have the time to meet up in person for events like this for the planning. We'll do it when we get there, but how do we get everyone together and get them on the same channel? Social media is real, right? How are we going to keep people's the attention span for everyone? And so finding other ways to engage the community, maybe through little small videos that explain, I don't know, in 1 minute, what does this text mean? Right? Stuff like that is going to be able to stick and retain with people, rather than, I don't know what the Bhagavad Gita says. I mean, I can't recite it from my heart, but I can pick out certain things from it, right? And based off of that, that's what I'm going to take away with me. So as long as we can capture that more and more, then I think the generations after will be okay. But if we fail to do that now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly as Rome did mention, this temple, I must be really grateful just because the formation of Akshayam and the creation of this program, Anubhava, were all ideas from our temple management who wanted to give us a platform to come together to talk about these issues. And we're really grateful to be part of this community, and I think you should make use of all these resources. I mean, we're starting from a small little population, but as Rome said, through social media we can really expand our reach. And I think I have great plans for the future, along with all of my members. And now for some audience questions. We have a long one for Rome. Okay. The Indian community has started to be represented a bit more thoroughly and has steered away from the stereotypes in recent years. However, people like Priyanka Chopra, MIA, and other notable Indian celebrities in Western media and films have resorted to very non-traditionally Indian methods in order to fit in. Do you think that is bad, or are they just embracing the Western culture and Indian people will just have to adjust to less clothes and all that which has been taboo?
Good question. Who said that? Okay. It's a good question. Okay. So I would say that is a very loaded question, but the answer that I'd give to it is Priyanka Chopra, MIA, all these, these figures, they have some sense of commercialization. It's because the market demands it. They have to find that way to fit in. So they could eventually try to mold back to a hybrid version of themselves. But for now, I think they have to kind of, not sell themselves short of a commercialization, but they have to adhere to the market standards. And that's only because if they try to be any different, they won't get work. Or it'll be very difficult for them to keep getting continuous work. And to have that stream in entertainment is nearly impossible, right? So that's why you'll see people who enter and they'll maybe do one show, or they'll be in one movie, in one role, but then no one else can picture them in anything else but that role, right? So, or they get pigeonholed into just playing the Indian guy who's come to the US for the first time. So in order to avoid that, you have to kind of experiment with different roles and figure out, okay, I'm gonna do the commercial work. And then eventually, hopefully, you find your middle ground. So I guess they're exploring both extremes, and then eventually they'll find moderation. I hope that happens. But for now, I think that's the path.
Thank you. And for Dr. Agarwal, being in the medical field, how do you differentiate between science and religion and allow both of them to work together at the end of the day?
It's a good question. To my understanding, science and art of medicine and spirituality or religion, whatever you want to call it, they're complementary to each other. They are not, absence of one is the presence of other. It's not that way. I give, for example, if I treat somebody for asthma, the medicines do the treatment, but the healing actually comes from my intent of the karma, from my intention to doing something good, and that's the intent behind my karma, and that does the healing. I think that the intent of action that your karma defines is where spirituality and science, they exist together. There are a lot of, as you dig deeper into science, Big Bang Theory or Higgs boson or whatever you want to call it, the more you explore, the more you find that there are undefined, unanswered questions. And then if you find an answer to those questions, there will be more unanswered questions. And eventually it all ties down to one big force that is around us. You want to call it Ishva, you want to call it energy, you want to call it life form, or whatever you want to call it. So eventually it all ties down together in one single source of energy that is governing this whole universe. You may call it, and that's what Hinduism is. That's what spirituality is to me. And so they are not mutually exclusive. They exist together in my life on an everyday basis, and that's how I see them. I hope it answers.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Aditi, is there any harm that you see with the increased use of Lord Ganesha's face, for example, as tattoos, or Om bracelets distributed everywhere, from peace rallies to being sold widely in any store around the corner?
So I think there is, it's always a fine balance. I think there is a risk of making casual or ornamental that which is sacred. That's kind of where I would draw the line. In terms of Ganesha's as tattoos or as jewelry, I think a lot of that does come back to intent. So it may be that for a person that's how they connect. It becomes a lot more gray, and there are just questions of tattoos in general. Things like Om bracelets and things like that. Again, I think there's a personal element to it in terms of what a person does for jewelry and signs and signals and how they connect to that. The broader question, I think, is we have these symbols or we have these images that people like to use just as art or as decoration. So you have like doormats, or you have shoes or things like that, and that I think does cross the line because these are sacred images to us and they're divine. So when they're treated as not divine, I think that's a problem. That's bad. The other areas, I think it starts to get into a little bit of gray.
Great, thank you. And there are a lot of questions for Rome, it seems. So another one is, should there be a change in the Indian movie industry to go back to our cultural roots?
Take that one, please.
I mean, personally, I don't like where it's headed. I'm more of I like artistic films in terms of, the deeper meaning and the ones that are not too commercialized. So I look at directors like Farhan Akhtar's film, Zoya Akhtar. I just like where they have that rawness, but it's not commercialized. So I think you're right, you brought up a good point. You can't use that same argument that I suggested in India. But I think that if you do still have that diverse pool of filmmakers who are focusing on those stories that are telling the root stories, right? I mean, they may not be commercialized as much, right? There may be independent films, there may be documentaries, etc. But finding ways to bring that closer to the market and get more exposure is what's needed, right? India creates so many different films, but distribution is where it suffers, right? All the films that are made in India are not screened. And it's because there's a large volume of it, and there's so many different stakeholders within each step of the process of distribution that it never gets to that limelight. So either find the way to make those stories more prominent, or increase the distribution factors economically, financially, etc. I think those are the two ways to solve the problem. Does that answer your question?
Could I just add something? So I think recently, like a month or so ago, this movie came out, Bahubali 2, and people may have seen it, and that kind of goes against a lot of what we're seeing in Bollywood now, which is moving away from traditional clothing and traditional values and things like that. And this movie kind of went against that and was a huge commercial success, even here in the opening weekend. I think it was like in the top 3. So I think part of it is, yes, there's a market and there are market pressures, and then there is kind of this pressure conforming to that to have success. But I think the other part of it is the arts have so much power to create taste and to create culture and to move the way that people react to culture. So I think if you can tell a good story that's entertaining, that people will like, and combine that with the ethos of traditional values or something that's uplifting and positive, I think there will always be an audience for that. And I think we shouldn't shy away from the commercial challenges, but have faith that like if you look at our traditional dress, it just looks beautiful, or all these great stories we have in our history, or like we have like a huge temple, like it's great artistically. But I think we just haven't had the confidence to say, we'll have faith in that, and that's what we're going to showcase, but we'll do it in a really entertaining way. And because we haven't done that, the market hasn't evolved like that. But I think if we do that, the market will respond, because those are great things that I think everyone will love to see.
Great question. And I think the last question is for Dr. Agarwal. And so you mentioned religion as a means to manage stress levels. And apparently a lot of us here are very stressed. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, the idea of religion helping manage New York City lifestyles and college careers and stuff like that?
Modern student life or career life is very stressful. In fact, there's extremely high increasing incidence of depression and psychological disorders in students, medical residents, physicians. And this all brings us back to what can be done before these things happen to us, before we get into that burnt out zone, when we are burnt out of doing things, too many things over and over again, too many times. One of the best way to address the way I look at it is yoga, meditation. It brings you in alignment of your mind, body, and spirit, and it de-stresses you. Even our ancient chantings that we were taught traditionally, doing some morning chantings or evening prayers, that brings out a kind of vibe around you that de-stresses you. It takes negative energy out of you and it brings you back to center so that you're out of all the stress is gone and you're ready to take the next stage ahead in your life. So these are some things that you can do. The other thing I would suggest is to work hard. Karma is a given thing. We all have to work hard to strive towards excellence, to do better. It is given. But don't attach too much to what will happen. The outcome is not what you have control over. That's what is destined. That's what God has under control. If you don't attach too much to the outcome, you will feel free to do what you can do the best. So that will take some of the stress of outcome or worrying about what's going to happen out of you. So that is another thing that you can do. In building a discipline, which again brings us to Hindu philosophy. So one of the greatest things that Hindu philosophy teaches us is discipline. Waking up, doing certain things before going to bed, doing certain things in evenings. That discipline, that routine gives comfort to our mind and body. And if you keep a discipline in life, a simple way of life, that will also take a lot of stress from everyday life for us. So hopefully some of you could take advantage of these things that we have.
Yeah. To close off, I want to give you guys one more chance to really quickly talk to our young people and tell them maybe in a minute or so why they should get more involved in our temples, why they should be more prideful of our faith, and ways that they can get involved while still, working on their careers or in school and so on and so forth. So if you can talk to them directly and say, inspire them in some sort of way, this is a chance.
So I'm going to start with something first to inspire more people to get into the creative field, and then I'll definitely answer that question if you don't mind. One thing that I want to tell you guys is that a lot of people will tell you that you need certain things before you can start to make a film, or you need certain things in order to do a career like this. I'll tell you the story. One of my friends who is the reason why I'm at this conference, Mohita Shripati, she's part of the community and she knows Teja really well. And they went to high school together. Her and I decided to make a film while we were in our senior years of college. So we didn't have any funding, we didn't know the story or anything like that. The idea literally started from a napkin conversation, right, in a cafeteria. We didn't have any funding, we went out for crowdsourcing, we got support from the community, we got support from friends and family. We ended up making a $15,000 film, right, the budget was $15,000. We screened at multiple film festivals, but it all started, and we eventually gained our parents' support, right? At first, everyone was against us, they were like, why are you wasting your time, you gotta focus on your studies, etc., etc. So, access to capital is always going to be an issue, no matter if you're starting a project today versus 10 years in the future. Everyone has money problems, all right? So don't let that be the factor that stops you. The real factor that should stop you, or you should think about, is your parents' support, because that's going to definitely be a reoccurring theme in your life. So find ways to show proof. And how I did it was, we said, okay, Mom and Dad, this is what the trailer will look like. And we broke it down into little steps. And based off of that approval process, they said, oh, he's not just running around with a camera doing nothing, he's actually making a film. So little baby steps definitely help. And finding the ways to channel and surrounding yourselves with different people. I think as South Asians, one thing we definitely really need to improve on, from the religious perspective, from faith, from beliefs, is we need to collaborate more. You'll never see a lot of Indians together because, I don't know what it is, it's just the mentality is different. We need to find ways to collaborate, cooperate, and grow an ecosystem. And in some ways, it's been done in other ways, like in other communities, but from the creative space, it hasn't. And so surround yourself, like you're the aspiring filmmaker, surround yourself with other people, like a writer who wants to make it big, right? A cameraman that wants to make it big. And then once you eventually succeed in aligning your visions, everything else kind of falls into place because you know you're headed in the same direction for the most part. So that was the career part. Going back to the religion, I think keep coming to events like this because this exposure, this network, the ability to talk to each other and say, hey, what are your beliefs in this situation? Or what are your thoughts on this? That's where we're really going to grow and excel. It's not from, like if I just talk, I'm just saying things that I already know in my head. But if I'm listening, if I'm contributing, if I'm actively engaging with the ecosystem, that's the only way I'm going to grow and learn. So it sounds very simple, but a lot of people don't do this. And that's why I think that we need to grow these conversations and have more people, like I respect the parents for coming out today as well, not just the young professionals, but everyone should be involved in this conversation. We shouldn't just have focus groups. They should be transparent and they should be on the same page.
So my 2 words would be, medicine is a great profession. I met a lot of people who have gone against the grain to do things what their passion was. If medicine is your passion, embrace it. Be ready to work hard, and it's going to be, trust me, fruitful. You'll not be fighting for money. It comes naturally in the profession. And it's an extremely rewarding feeling at the end of the day to be part of people's lives, to be such an integral part that they remember you years down the line. I have patients who I follow, the parents, the children, the uncles, the aunts. You become part of their families. And there are many, many such families who you will become integral part of. So if you want to spread your skill set into a broader community, medicine is a great profession to be in. So, and you're free to practice your religion. You'll find plenty doctors who are Hindus around you, and you'll feel a proud Hindu doing your job.
I guess also starting with the professional, what I would say is it doesn't matter if you go into film or if you go to medicine, law, nonprofit, whatever you do, but you should do it thoughtfully. So know what it is that you want out of your career, know what's important to you. I saw a great thing once that said, you know, we spend a lot of times worrying about job title or the name of a position, and what this said is, don't think about the title, think about what are the problems you want to solve, what are the things you really want to do, and then find a career path for that. And then it changes, it's different at different times. When I started my career, I started at a law firm. It was very grueling work, there was no work-life balance, but I knew it would be good experience to set me up in the future. And then I found a job that really gave me the time and space to do what's important to me on my free time, but it also gave me the financial security to pursue it. So that was important to me. So I think being thoughtful, know what's important to you out of life, and know what you want to do with your life. And as Swamiji was saying earlier this morning, you know, 3 components of happiness. So pleasure is a part of it. Then the other part of it is engagement and finding meaning and purpose. And you can find meaning and purpose in many different ways. So for me, one thing I think about is, if I spend 12 hours a day in the office, that's where we're spending the majority of our time. So can I make a positive impact on the people I work with? Can I make them feel happier? Can I be a mentor to them or support them? And then if I'm contributing to a happier work environment, then there's so many different people's lives I can be touching in that way. So I'd encourage people to really think about that. In terms of the temple and connecting to the temple and why you should come to the temple. So I have a puja room in my house where I do my daily puja and sadhana. But I live in New Jersey now, but I used to live in Flushing for several years, just a few blocks away from the temple. And I would come here at least 2-3 times a week. I'd go for like a walk in Kasana Park, and I'd come during evening arati time, and I spent a lot of time here. And you know, the deities in the temple are not just statues of stone or marble. They really are, when the worship is done properly as it is here, they really become like living beings, and you start forming a relationship with them or a connection with them, and you get so much out of it. And it's not just asking for blessings like, you know, let me do well in my exam or let me get this job, but it's really feeling that relationship and that connection. And when I came back this morning before the event, we were walking around, and it felt like, you know, reconnecting with family members, because I still have that personal connection and that personal relationship. And so that's what you really come to the temple for. And you know, you get a lot out of it. And also, the temples are the centers still for our community. This is really where we do get together as a community, and for all the outreach that we want to do, I think it has to start and end at the temple, because that's the spiritual heart of the community, and it's also where the community comes together. So, so it's important to do that, and to also find ways to make the temples also more responsive to the needs of the community.
Thank you guys.
Can I add something real quick? Going off your point, sorry. One thing that I've definitely learned, and I just want to reiterate and tell everyone about, is that we go to the temple, and I don't know how accurate this is for everyone else here, but for me it was definitely a case. I would thank God, I would ask God for things, but then I wouldn't thank God, right? So it's like, I was always expecting things, I was always wanting things, but I never did the appreciation factor or the gratefulness factor. So I think, and I've asked a lot of my friends, I was like, okay, so you go to the temple, you say, okay, can I do well on this exam? But then do you follow up with God after? Like, do you actually say to him, you know, thank you for providing me with this opportunity, or hey, God, you know, we all have our internal monologues, right? I mean, I'm just saying this because I'm an actor and stuff like that, because we do this all the time, but everyone sits in front of the mirror, or when you're praying to God, you do have those conversations. And they're internal, they're very secretive, right? If you make that more consistent, and instead of just turning to God when you need things, or when you want things, you'll realize, and I'm a huge believer in the universe and God and everything, that things will happen your way. And it will be unexpected, it will be surprised, right? It'll be surprised. So my biggest takeaway is follow up with God, 100%, because there are a lot of benefits in terms of things that you won't even realize that happen to you.
It's a great point that we're ending off in, and I want you to join me in thanking all of them, Aditi Banerjee, Dr. Seema Agarwal, and Rom Chopra.
Thank you guys so much. Please join me in the front of the stage, because I think on the stage space is a little tight, and we'd like to present you all with an official token of thanks from the Hindu Temple Society of North America. So as we conclude the conference today, I definitely urge you guys to please fill out the feedback forms. You know, I've been saying this a couple of times throughout today, but it really makes a difference to hear your input. And thanks to the feedback we received last year, we were really able to, you know, bring you new speakers and panelists this year. So please just take a few seconds, fill that out. And we'd also, after the conference concludes, please join us for tea right here in this room. And I'd like to introduce the president of the Hindu Temple Society of North America, Dr. Uma Maisreker, who would like to say a few words.
Thank you, Abhirami and Ravli. First of all, it's really, I feel so elated today, as young as they all are, because this was my dream, it's still my dream, to see ultimately the baton being passed on to the group. That's my goal. We build institutions, but we have to make sure they're secure and carried on well. And I tell you, this group, when they developed this Akshayam under the auspices of initially Anubhava 2016, which then Akshayam has grown and continues to grow. And they now have a goal to reach, not just have a conference once a year, but more often than not, meet, discuss, talk, and then discuss with our people, our members, our trustees, our committee members, to share their thoughts, their experiences, how they can manage institutions such as this. A temple is not just a place of worship, especially in this country. Back home, yes, temples are only places of worship. But here, they are community places. And we all know many things happen. Weddings take place, and people get jobs because they meet so many people. And young people make new friends, the older people make new friends, the seniors have a place to share their thoughts, their experience. So it's a multi-active institution with which we should aim at every member of this community. Apart from that, of course, we must also think of the local community, without whose support we cannot survive here. Perhaps all the temples face with the neighboring community here. We have a lot of Asian community. Of course, when the temple was started initially, there were a lot of other ethnic people, and we did have a lot of problems, many of you probably know. But ultimately, we have outgrown all that. We have become part of this great community. And I think without the support of the community, temple cannot survive. And young people like these can make this even stronger, because their ties with the local community is stronger than what ours has been. And I'm really proud, and I congratulate this Akshan group for having taken this initiative. They've worked very hard for the last 6 months, transferring telephone calls, meetings, texting messages, but ultimately to see the fruit which is today. And this is again beginning, because last year was the first. And let's wish them all very well. May God bless them for continued success, not only in hosting another Anubhava of 2018, but continue their activities, and of course in their primary lives, in their education, and in their career. Thank you all very, very much.
For your kind words, and Dr. Meisterikar has really been an inspiration to this whole group and has been so supportive and encouraging of all of us. So we really thank her and all of our Aksham advisors as well. And now we conclude Anubhava 2017, and on behalf of Aksham and the Hindu Temple Society of North America, we thank all of you for joining us today for a conversation on the Hindu-American experience, which we hope to continue at future events. We are grateful to our speakers and our panelists who took a leap of faith by agreeing to participate in this opportunity and generously share their thoughts and experiences as Hindus and professionals with all of us. It makes me proud to see such a diverse, successful, articulate, and young group come together as Hindus. Anubhava, of course, would not be possible without our conference planning committee and Aksham advisors who helped pull this program together over many months. We also couldn't do this without our dedicated team of volunteers who helped produce and run a seamless event. On behalf of Aksham, we thank Dr. Uma Meisterikar again for investing in our young people and giving us the opportunity to take ownership of our own events, ideas, and futures here at the temple. And last but not least, all of this would not be possible without the blessings of Sri Mahavallabha Ganapati. Thank you for joining us today, and if you're interested in getting more involved, please talk to one of us. And please stick around and join us for tea. We'd love for you to continue chatting with each other, mingling and networking. Thank you.